Here in the great hall was a tapestry of layered scents, the sharp perfume of crushed pine needles underfoot, the heady, smoky sweetness of ceremonial oils burning in iron braziers, and the potent, primal aroma of gathered werewolves in their human forms. I pressed my spine against the rough-hewn wooden wall, willing the shadows to absorb me, to make me a mere smudge against the timber amidst the sea of eager, shifting bodies. The annual mating ceremony, held beneath the autumn moon at its most luminous peak, was the paramount event for our kind. It was a night of destiny and alliances, where bonds were forged to strengthen bloodlines and unite packs. My presence was a quiet error in the grand design. I did not belong here. Not truly. My fingers found the familiar shape beneath the simple wool of my dress, a small silver pendant, cool against my skin. It was my mother's final gift, a delicate half-moon etched with fine, swirling patterns that whispered of her human origins. "Remember who you are," her fading voice echoed in my memory as she fastened it around my child's neck. Her meaning had been a mystery then. Now, it was a constant, heavy truth. I was a hybrid, a creature of two worlds yet master of neither, a secret most pure-blooded wolves would consider a stain to be purged rather than a person to be welcomed. My wolf was a faint echo compared to the roaring presences around me, my senses were duller, my place in our intricate hierarchy non-existent. Yet, duty had dragged me here as a temporary handmaiden to Eliza, daughter of our Pax Beta. No other was available to assist her preparations for this pivotal night. "Stay in the shadows, Clara," Eliza had instructed hours earlier, her gaze critical as I adjusted the intricate silver fastenings of her ceremonial gown. "Do not draw a single eye. Simply be nearby if I require you." Her words held no malice, only the stark practicality of our world. A half-blood at the mating ceremony was an anomaly, a potential slight to tradition. I was a ghost, meant only to observe, never to be seen. The hall, a vast circle of ancient timber, hummed with subdued energy. The highest-ranking wolves, alphas and their kin, occupied the raised dais at the far end. Betas and their lineages filled the foremost benches, with warriors and hunters behind them. The rest, healers, crafters, those of lesser standing, crowded the rear. I existed in the spaces between, belonging to no section, a fleeting impression at the edge of everyone's vision. Then, the deep, resonant thrum of the ceremonial drums began. The rhythm was a primal heartbeat that vibrated in the floorboards and called to something deep within my own diluted blood. My weak inner wolf stirred, a drowsy creature reaching for a sun it could never fully feel. "Clara." Eliza's sharp whisper cut through the burgeoning sound. From several rows ahead, she gestured with subtle urgency. "Water. Now." Grateful for the directive, I slipped away from my post, weaving through the gathered wolves toward the long tables lining the rear wall, laden with feast offerings. As I reached for a crystal goblet, the atmosphere in the hall shifted palpably. The drumming stuttered, then surged anew as a profound silence descended. I turned, the goblet nearly slipping from my fingers. The northern pack had arrived. Unlike the 4 other packs already assembled, the northerners were legend more than reality. They hailed from the coldest, most remote territories, and tales of their formidable strength and austere ways spread through the southern packs like winter frost. Their leader, the Alpha King, was a figure of fearsome myth, said to be the most powerful wolf alive, an apex predator who had wrested his throne through brutal triumph. He had never taken a mate, despite being in his prime. And now, he stood framed in the great doorway. Even in human form, his dominance was an almost physical force. He was imposingly tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the entry. He surveyed the hall with an unnerving stillness, his eyes a pale, piercing silver in the torchlight. Dark hair, longer than southern fashion dictated, fell past his shoulders in a way that was both untamed and regal. But it was the scar that captured and held the gaze, a jagged, silvered line carving from his right temple down to his jaw, a permanent testament to violence worn like a crown. The entire assembly seemed to hold its breath. I remembered my task, filling the goblet with trembling hands before turning to retreat. In my distracted haste, I misjudged my path. Instead of winding back through the central benches, I found myself skirting the empty rows reserved for distinguished visitors, rows now being filled by the northern contingent. "Pardon me," I murmured to the air, attempting to correct my course, but the current was against me. The Alpha King and his retinue were flowing into the reserved section, and I was suddenly adrift among them. I pressed myself flat against the wall, becoming a part of the architecture, as imposing figures clad in dark furs and rugged leather passed. Their eyes slid over me, seeing nothing of consequence. I might have remained invisible had he not stopped. His step faltered directly beside me. His head turned, not with sudden movement, but with the predator's deliberate grace. His nostrils flared subtly, drawing in the air. Dread, cold and absolute, washed through me. He was scenting. Scenting me. My carefully masked odor, the blended signature of human and wolf that I disguised with herbal washes and aromatic oils. Could he detect it? Would he denounce me here before everyone? Those silver eyes locked onto mine, and my breath crystallized in my lungs. For a span of time that felt eternal, he simply looked, his gaze so intense I felt laid bare. Then, to my utter shock, he moved not away in disdain, but to claim the bench space immediately beside where I stood frozen. Here, he stated, his voice a low rumble that resonated in my very bones. His beta, a severe-faced man with eyes like flint, leaned close. My king, the assigned seats for the alphas are on the dais. These are for. I said here. The words were not loud, but the absolute authority in them silenced his beta instantly. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I stood, paralyzed, beside the most feared alpha in all the territories, as he deliberately claimed a humble bench at the wall. Sit. The command was directed at me, his gesture indicating the space next to him. My frantic gaze found Eliza across the hall, her face a mask of stunned horror. The water in the goblet I still clutched trembled, threatening to spill. I cannot, I whispered, the sound barely audible. I am just a handmaiden. My lady. Sit. This time, his voice contained a resonance that bypassed my conscious thought and spoke directly to the wolf within, however faint she was. My legs folded beneath me before my mind could protest, and I found myself seated on the hard bench beside the alpha king of the northern pack. The drummers, after a stunned pause, recovered their rhythm. A wave of shocked whispers broke over the hall. His own warriors exchanged glances of pure bewilderment. Your name? He did not look at me, his attention seemingly fixed on the elder now beginning the opening rites. Clara, I breathed, the word lost in the sudden pounding in my ears. Clara. He repeated it as if weighing its substance. Then, so quietly I might have imagined it, he added, you carry the scent of moonlight, and hidden things. For the next hour, I sat as rigid as stone beside him, the forgotten goblet of water growing warm in my hands. I barely registered the ceremonial proceedings, the eligible wolves presenting themselves, the traditional dances, the ancient vows. My entire world had narrowed to the formidable presence beside me, a furnace of contained power, and the terrifying certainty that he knew my secret. When the formal ceremony concluded and the crowd began to rise for the feast, I saw my chance for escape. I must go, I whispered, finally setting the goblet down. My lady will need me. His hand shot out, closing around my wrist. His grip was not harsh, but its unshakable strength was unmistakable. Your lady. I serve Eliza, daughter of Beta Renard of the Southern Woods Pack. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. Not any longer. Before I could question him, he stood, drawing me up with him. His height made me feel infinitesimal. With his hand still encircling my wrist, he turned to his attentive beta. This one will attend me during our stay. The beta, Thorn, looked aghast. My king, we have brought your usual attendants. There is no need to. Do you question me, Thorn? The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to plummet. Thorn immediately lowered his gaze. No, my king. The alpha silver eyes returned to me, and something in their depth sent a complex shiver down my spine. Fear, yes, but beneath it, a thread of terrifying fascination. You will attend me at the feast. It was a command, yet it held a strange undercurrent, something akin to keen curiosity. As he led me toward the feasting tables, cutting through the murmuring crowd, I caught a final glimpse of Eliza. Her face was pale, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked uncomfortably like betrayal. I was adrift, unmoored from the only role I had ever known, pulled into the orbit of a force of nature. One truth echoed in my mind, somehow, impossibly, the most powerful alpha alive had seen me, and I was certain he saw exactly what I was. The feast hall, a cavernous extension of the ceremonial space, buzzed with attention thicker than the smoke from the roasting pits. As the Alpha King Asher, I now knew his name, led me through the crowd, I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes tracking our progress. My legs moved as if through deep water, my will subsumed by the firm grasp on my wrist. His hold was both an anchor in the sudden storm and a brand marking me for scrutiny. My king. The elder who had officiated the ceremony materialized before us, his weathered face a careful mask of deference and concern. The seat of honor awaits you at the alpha table. Asher paused, his thumb absently brushing the frantic pulse at my wrist. Could he feel the frantic rhythm? I prefer to observe before I engage, he replied, his voice a deep current beneath the hall's noise. A separate table. For two. The elder's gaze flickered to me, then back, confusion evident. As you wish. He bowed slightly. Attendants scrambled, and moments later a small, sturdy table was established on a slight platform along the hall's eastern side. It was a strategic position, offering a panoramic view of the entire gathering while maintaining a tangible distance. A predator's perch, I thought with a chill. As we were seated, platters of fragrant roasted venison, root vegetables glazed with honey, and warm bread placed before us, I finally gathered the shards of my courage. Leaning slightly forward, I whispered a question meant only for his preternatural hearing. Why are you doing this? He did not answer immediately, selecting a slice of meat with deliberate ease. Only after taking a deliberate bite did he lean in, his presence suddenly consuming the space between us. You ask perilous questions for one whose blood holds such a potent secret, he murmured, his silver eyes capturing mine. A fresh wave of ice flooded my veins. I don't know what you mean. Your heart, he said, taking a sip of dark wine, his gaze unwavering, it accelerates when you speak an untruth. A fascinating tell. He gestured to my untouched plate. Eat. You will need your strength. For what? For surviving the evening, he stated, as casually as commenting on the weather. Across the room, I found Eliza. She was seated with her family now, her father, Beta Renard, in deep conversation with our pack alpha, Kent. Their glances toward our isolated table were frequent and laden with unspoken questions. Eliza herself watched me, her beautiful features no longer showing betrayal, but a cold, calculating confusion. I could not fault her. From her perspective, I had inexplicably abandoned my duty and been elevated to a place of mysterious significance. They speculate, Asher observed, following my line of sight. They wonder if I have taken a sudden interest in claiming you as a mate. It would be politically complex. I understand the Beta's daughter had aspirations toward a northern alliance through marriage. I nearly choked on a piece of bread I'd forced myself to taste. That is absurd. I am a handmaiden. Nothing more. Are you? He tilted his head, the firelight catching the silver scar. Tell me of your mother. The abrupt shift startled me. My hand flew to the hidden pendant. She died when I was young. And your father? A warrior of our pack. He fell in a border dispute before I was born. This, at least, was the story I had always been told, a convenient fiction, I now suspected, to explain my mother's return from a solitary journey, already with child. Asher considered this, the intensity of his focus, a tangible pressure. And yet, you possess a scent unlike any wolf I have ever encountered. His voice dropped lower, a confidential rumble. A melody of deep forest shadows, and sunlight on mortal skin. There was no mistaking it now. He had named my duality. Desperation clawed at my throat. Please, I whispered, the word ragged. If you expose me, they will cast you out, he finished, setting his goblet down with a soft, definitive click. Or worse. The southern packs have always prized purity above almost all else. He said it not with malice, but with a cold statement of fact. Tears threatened, but I forced them back. Showing weakness here was unthinkable. If you know what I am, why this charade? Why not denounce me immediately? For the first time, a flicker of something other than analytical interest crossed his face. It was complex, fleeting, a mix of memory and resolve. Perhaps I find the puzzle of you compelling. Before I could press further, a commotion erupted at the hall's main entrance. A group of warriors, their clothing torn and stained with dark patches that could only be blood, staggered inside. The feast's clamor died instantly as their leader, a man with a gash across his brow, gasped a message meant for all enhanced ears to catch. Attack at the eastern ridge. Rogues. 30 strong. They breached the outer perimeter. Chaos erupted. Benches scraped and overturned as warriors surged to their feet. Alphas began barking orders, their voices cutting through the rising panic. The feast was forgotten, transformed into a war council in an instant. Asher rose in one fluid, powerful motion. The man beside me vanished, replaced entirely by the warlord. His demeanor shifted from unsettling composure to lethal readiness. "Thorn," he called. His beta appeared at his side instantly. "Gather our warriors. We move for the ridge." Thorn nodded but hesitated, his eyes darting to me. "And the girl?" Asher's hand descended to my shoulder. The weight was neither gentle nor cruel, it was proprietary, a claiming of responsibility. "She remains with me. My king, with respect, a battlefield is no place for a—" "I did not request your assessment, Thorn." The beta's mouth snapped shut. He bowed and vanished into the dispersing crowd to execute his orders. Asher turned to me, and the ferocity in his expression was startling. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say." My mind raced to my nominal duties. I should find Eliza, help secure the women. "Your loyalty is misplaced," he interrupted, his gaze piercing. "Did they ever extend to you the concern you now offer them? Were you ever more than useful shadow?" The question struck with the precision of an arrow. No, I had not. I was tolerated, a tool that knew its place. Even Eliza's kindness had been that of a mistress to a competent servant. The sting of that truth was sharper than fear. "I am no fighter," I protested. "I will be a hindrance." A strange, almost pensive expression softened the harsh lines of his face for a heartbeat. "Strength wears many forms, little half-moon." The nickname, a clear reference to my dual nature and my pendant, sent another confusing tremor through me. "Now, come." He led me through the panicking throng with formidable efficiency, his mere presence parting the crowd like a prow through water. We emerged into the crisp autumn night. The full moon hung swollen and brilliant above, its light bleaching the color from the world. Warriors from all 5 packs were already assembling in the torchlit clearing, forming into units with a discipline that overrode the recent festivity. I saw Eliza being shepherded toward a fortified lodge with other high-ranking females, a flurry of furs and fearful glances. For a fleeting moment, I envied the clarity of her place, the certainty of being protected. Asher guided me not toward safety, but toward a knot of his northern warriors. They stood apart, an island of silent, grim readiness. They were universally larger, their bearing radiating a contained, wild potency that made even other pack warriors give them a wide berth. "My king," one acknowledged with a sharp nod. His ice-blue eyes landed on me, and disapproval tightened his features. "The female should be with the others." "She stays," Asher stated, the finality in the words silencing further comment. He turned to me. "Can you ride?" The question was so unexpected I blinked. "Yes, I was taught as a child, but—" He did not let me finish. A sharp, piercing whistle cut through the night air. From the inky shadows beside the stables, a shape emerged. It was a horse, yet unlike any I had seen. A massive black stallion, its coat absorbing the moonlight, trotted forward with an uncanny intelligence. Its eyes, in a fleeting glance, seemed to gleam with a ruddy, inner light. A shadow steed, bred in the remote north for alpha kin. "This is Midnight," Asher said, his hand running along the beast's powerful neck with familiar reverence. "He will carry us both." "Both? You cannot mean to take me toward a battle." His silver eyes found mine in the gloom. "Not into the fray. But I will not leave you here unguarded." "Why?" The frustration of the inexplicable evening finally boiled over. "What concern am I to you? I am no one. A ghost in my own pack." Something dangerous and earnest flickered in his expression. "You are wrong on both counts," he said, the words quiet but absolute. Then, before I could retort, his hands were at my waist. He lifted me as if I weighed no more than a cloak and placed me securely on Midnight's back. A moment later, he swung up behind me, his solid chest against my back, his arms encircling me to take hold of the stallion's mane. The intimacy of the position locked my muscles. I was unaccustomed to such closeness, especially with a male, and an alpha at that. His warmth and scent, pine, cold stone, and a crisp, wild edge enveloped me. "Be at ease," his voice was a low vibration near my ear. "Your fear is a live thing, but it is not me you fear in this moment." Correct. He was right. The terror was for the rogues, the battle, the utter unknown. His presence, while intimidating, felt paradoxically like the only stable point in a tilting world. Then what am I in danger from? I asked, hating the tremor I could not suppress. He didn't answer. Instead, he called to his warriors, his voice transforming into a clear, carrying command. We ride for the eastern ridge. The rogues will have used the mountain pass. We cut off their retreat. With a subtle pressure of his thighs, he urged Midnight forward. And then we were flying. The forest became a dark, rushing blur as the shadow steed moved with preternatural speed and silence, his great hooves finding purchase where none seemed to exist. The northern warriors, some on similar steeds, others shifting into massive, sleek wolf forms, fell in behind us, a phantom cohort in the moon-dappled night. The forest was a charcoal sketch streaking past, the world reduced to the thunder of Midnight's hooves, the whip of cold air against my face, and the solid, unyielding presence at my back. I stopped fighting the position, letting my body align with the rhythm of the stallion's gait, leaning into the warmth that radiated from Asher. It was a surrender to practicality, yet it felt unnervingly like trust. Why would rogues attack during the mating ceremony? I called over the wind, my voice fragmented. It's sacred ground. Neutral territory. His arms tightened minutely around me, a subtle adjustment. That is precisely the lure. All 5 packs gathered, minds and rituals turned inward, defenses ceremonial rather than vigilant. It is an opportunity a strategic foe would not ignore. But what could they possibly gain? Raiding for supplies. Power. Territory. Females. The words were stark, devoid of inflection. A pause, then he added, but this feels different. Too coordinated for common rabble. We burst from the tree line onto a rocky promontory overlooking a narrow, treacherous pass carved between 2 mountains. Asher reined Midnight to a silent halt with barely a touch. Below, in the stark monochrome of moonlight, movement betrayed them. Dozens of figures, some in the loping forms of wolves, others upright and armed, moved with purpose through the defile. There, he murmured, his breath a warm cloud near my ear. See their formation? Rogues fight for survival, each for themselves. They move like a unit. Like a pack. He was correct. Even with my lesser sight, the disciplined advance was clear. This was no desperate band. It was an organized force. With a series of low, guttural commands, Asher directed his warriors. They melted into the shadows along the ridge like smoke, positions taken with lethal quiet. Then, keeping me before him, he guided Midnight down a steep, hidden game trail that wound to a shallow cave mouth partially obscured by a fall of rock and ancient roots. Dismounting, he lifted me down with that effortless strength. My feet found the uneven ground, my legs momentarily unsteady. You will wait here, he stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. Alone. The word escaped before I could temper it with courage. His expression shifted, the harsh lines softening a fraction. Midnight will guard you. His loyalty and senses are sharper than any 10 warriors. He placed a broad hand on the stallion's neck, murmuring something in a guttural, ancient tongue. The beast snorted softly and moved to stand before the cave entrance, a living barrier of muscle and sinew. Asher turned back to me. In the sliver of moonlight that pierced the cavern mouth, his eyes were luminous mercury. Stay here. Stay silent. I will return for you. A desperate, illogical fear rose. What if you do not? The question seemed to surprise him. Something flickered in his gaze, acknowledgement, perhaps, that I had voiced a concern for his safety. Then, the barest hint of a smile touched his lips, softening the severity of his scarred face. I am not so easily dismantled, little half-moon. He reached out, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought his fingers would brush my cheek. Instead, they found the silver chain at my neck, drawing the hidden pendant into the dim light. He studied the half-moon engraving, his thumb tracing the familiar pattern I knew so well. His expression became unreadable, a landscape of old memories. This was your mother's, he said. It was not a question. I nodded, my throat tight. Keep it close, he instructed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Remember who you are. He released the pendant, and as it settled cold against my skin, he added words so quiet they seemed woven from the darkness itself. There is a unique power in existing between 2 worlds, not wholly one or the other. Before I could grapple with this cryptic statement, he stepped back, the Alpha's mantle settling over him once more. I will return. Trust no one else. Then he was gone, vanishing into the night with a silence that belied his size. Midnight shifted, blocking more of the entrance, his warm, solid presence both a comfort and a reminder of my captivity. I sank onto a cold, flat stone, pulling my knees to my chest. The adrenaline of the ride faded, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion. The evening's events spiraled in my mind, from invisible handmaiden to a curiosity seated beside a king, to a secret exposed, to a refugee in a cave under the protection of a mythical steed. None of it cohered. He knew my secret. That was the immutable core. Yet instead of condemnation, he had offered cryptic protection. Why? The old, dark tales whispered in the back of my mind, stories of blood magic, of rites that required the rare, the mixed, the taboo. Was that his purpose? Was I a specimen to be used, a key to some ancient, northern power? The thought coiled in my stomach, cold and sickening. Distant sounds echoed up from the pass, the clash of steel, snarling roars that were more beast than man, sharp cries of pain. Midnight's ears swiveled like independent creatures, tracking the unseen battle. I clutched my mother's pendant, the metal warming to my touch. Remember who you are. Neither fully one nor the other, but something rare and special. Her words had been a mantra, a shield against the constant, low-grade shame of my difference. As a child, I'd hated my human half. It made me slow, weak, an object of pity or scorn among the wolf-born. But my mother had insisted it was a gift. You see with both eyes, my heart, she would say, her human fingers brushing my hair. The wolf sees the pack, the hunt, the hierarchy. The human sees the individual, the story, the possibility. One day, that double vision will matter. I had never believed her. Until now, perhaps. Asher's words echoed hers uncannily. Power in being both. A sudden, alert tension seized Midnight. He stilled, his head lifting, a low rumble building in his chest. I pressed deeper into the cave's darkness, my breath catching. Asher's warning echoed, trust no one else. The stallion's rumble subsided into a soft, recognizing whicker. A moment later, a familiar silhouette filled the entrance. Asher ducked inside, bringing with him the scent of night air, cold stone, and the coppery, unmistakable tang of blood. Dark, wet splashes marred his tunic and leathers. Are you injured? The question leapt from me, unbidden. He looked momentarily taken aback by my concern. No. This is not mine. His silver eyes swept over me, a rapid assessment. You are unharmed. I nodded, rising to my feet. I heard the fighting. Is it over? For now. His expression darkened, the grim set of his jaw returning. It was a diversion. A skilled one. While we engaged this group, a larger force struck the ceremonial grounds from the western approach. Fear, sharp and immediate, gripped me. The others, Eliza, the elders. The grounds were defended, he cut in, his voice tight. Successfully. But there were losses. He hesitated, the next words falling like stones. And captives. Several females were taken. Taken. The word was a breath of horror. Rogues sometimes steal females, he said, the words grating. Especially during mating gatherings. It is an old, barbaric tactic to build numbers, to break the spirit of rival packs. He saw the instinctive movement I made toward the entrance. His hand shot out, catching my arm. You are going nowhere near their territory. But we must help them. They are pack. And what were you to that pack, Clara? His question was not cruel, but relentless. A useful shadow. Did they ever extend to you the protection you now wish to rush and offer them? The truth of it was a physical blow. They had not. I was a tool in their household, my safety a minor footnote. Yet. They are still my people. I grew up with them. And now you are under my protection, he stated, the possessiveness in his tone both unsettling and, in that moment of desolation, strangely anchoring. I did not secure you only to deliver you into greater peril. The frustration of the night, the confusion, the fear, crested. Why? I demanded, pulling against his grip without force. Why this protection? You have not explained why you singled me out, why you keep my secret. What do you want from me? For a long moment, he was silent, his gaze searching my face as if the answer were written there. The sounds of the night, the distant calls of owls, the sigh of wind through pine filled the cavern. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to rise from a deep well of weariness, he released my arm. "Walk with me." He led me not back toward the carnage of the pass, but up a narrower, steeper path that wound along the spine of the ridge. The world was painted in shades of silver and ink, the moon our only witness. The air grew colder, thinner, carrying the clean, sharp scent of high altitude and distant snow. It was a northern scent, I realized, and for the first time, it stirred something faint and ancestral in my blood. We walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds our footfalls on stone and the whisper of the wind. Below and behind us, the faint glow of the ceremonial ground smudged the horizon, a beacon of disrupted peace. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured, as if recounting a history lesson of grave import. 18 winters passed, a female of the northern pack left our territory without the Alpha's leave. She was not of the highest rank, but she was, singular. Her name was Della, of the Silver Lake lineage. He paused, glancing at me. I kept my face still, but the name resonated like a struck bell in the hollow of my chest. She possessed a gift aside of sorts. She perceived patterns before they fully formed. Where the deer would run before a storm, which pairing would yield strong pups, when a dispute would fracture if left unchecked. Small prophecies. He fell silent again, collecting his thoughts or perhaps the memories themselves. She was gone for nearly a full cycle of seasons. When she returned, she was altered. Quieter, her gaze turned inward. Her gift had changed as well, muted in some ways, painfully acute in others. The pack elders, and my father most of all, questioned her relentlessly about her absence. What did she tell them? My voice was barely a breath. His silver eyes met mine, holding them in the moonlight. That she had dwelled among humans. That she had given her heart to one. And that she had borne a child, a daughter, whom she left in the care of that human, knowing our pack's laws would never accept a child of mixed blood. The cold night air seemed to solidify in my lungs. The pieces of my mother's vague stories, the secrecy, the pendant that spoke of a different world, they tumbled into a new, terrifying configuration. You believe, you think I am that child. I do not believe, Clara. I know. His certainty was absolute, an unshakable pillar in the shifting dark. Your scent is a tapestry. The warp is the deep pine and frost of the northern territories. The weft, he leaned closer, not in threat, but as a scholar examining a rare text. He inhaled slowly. The weft is the unmistakable signature of Della's bloodline. And beneath it all, the sun-warmed scent of humanity. You are her daughter. I stopped walking, the world tilting on its axis. If this is truth, why did she end her days with the Southern Woods pack? Why the story of a warrior father lost to battle? Asher's expression hardened, his scar standing out livid in the pale light. Because she was not merely returning. She was fleeing. From my father. A new kind of fear, ancient and deep, trickled through me. From you. Not for the reasons your fear now conjures, he said, reading my face with unsettling accuracy. I was not king then. My father ruled, and he was a wolf obsessed with power and purity. When Della returned, changed, he became fixated on a theory. He believed her child you would be a nexus of both worlds, that your mixed blood might magnify her gift, or twist it into something entirely new. A tool of immense potential. He intended to find you, to take you from your human father, and bring you north to be, studied. Cultivated. Used. And my mother fled to protect me, I finished, the horror of it washing over me. The lonely human settlements she'd sometimes spoke of with wistfulness, her insistence on our hidden life, her constant vigilance, it had not been paranoia. It had been a mother's desperate strategy. She sought asylum with the Southern pack, he confirmed. Crafted a new history, claimed a mate from among their own fallen to explain your existence. They accepted her, perhaps out of pity, perhaps out of curiosity, but never with full trust. And when she died, I said, the bitterness I usually kept buried rising to the surface, they kept me on as a servant. Useful, but never kin. Something akin to anger flashed in his eyes, a quicksilver fire. They knew. Or they strongly suspected. No pure-blooded wolf, no matter how weak, carries your particular fragrance. They chose willful ignorance. I shook my head, thinking of the old Alpha, of my mother's one quiet friend, both long dead. Only a few knew the whole truth. When they passed, the secret became a ghost. The current leaders may have their suspicions, but as long as I was compliant and invisible, it was easier for them to look past what stood before them. To see a tool, not a person, he finished, his voice thick with disdain. We had reached the pinnacle of the ridge. The view was staggering. Below us, the territories of the 5 packs unfurled like a rumpled, dark quilt under the moonlight. In the center, the wounded ceremonial ground smoldered. Beyond, to the far north, the land rose into jagged, snow-capped peaks I had only ever heard of in stories. His homeland. You still have not answered my question, I said softly, the vastness making me feel both insignificant and strangely connected to this new, sprawling history. What do you want from me? Asher was quiet for a long time, his profile etched against the star-flecked sky. When he finally spoke, his voice had shed some of its regal armor, revealing a layer of weary resolve beneath. When my father died and I took the throne, I made a vow to myself. I would find Della's child. Not to use you as he would have, as a resource to be exploited. He turned to face me fully, his gaze intense. But to offer you what was stolen, your birthright. A place among your mother's people. A choice. Birthright. The word felt foreign, a concept for others. I have no birthright. I am a hybrid. An accident of 2 worlds. You are half human, and half northern wolf, he countered, stepping closer. The raw, wild scent of him, of that distant land, enveloped me. Northern blood carries its own strength, its own resilience, even when blended. You have been taught to be ashamed of what you are, to see your human half as a flaw. No one has ever shown you how the 2 halves might make a whole greater than their parts. His proximity was overwhelming. He was a force of nature, a king, a predator. Every instinct screamed to step back, but a new, stubborn part of me held its ground. And you could teach me this? Yes. The simple, unshakable confidence in that single syllable was more staggering than any declaration of power. Before I could formulate a response, a long, ululating howl rose from the direction of the ceremonial grounds, a clear, summoning cry. The council call, Asher interpreted. The alphas gathered to respond to the attack and the captives. You should go, I said, suddenly exhausted by the weight of revelations. Come with me. I blinked, certain I had misheard. To a council of alphas. I am just a handma. If you say just a handmaiden once more, he interrupted, a flicker of something like exasperated humor in his eyes, I may reconsider my policy of patience. You are Della's daughter, of the Silver Lake line. By northern custom, that grants you standing. You have as much right to be present as any beta. The other alphas will not see it that way. And if they realize what I am, you will be under my protection, he stated, the words of vow carved in stone. None will dare challenge it. The absolute certainty should have been reassuring. Instead, it sent a different kind of tremor through me, a realization of the sheer, formidable power he wielded, and the dangerous line I would walk by accepting his shield. Why? I asked, the core question returning. Why risk political complication, discord with the other packs, for someone you have only just met? For someone who is not even a pure wolf? For a heartbeat, his guard dropped completely. I saw not the Alpha King, but a man marked by isolation, his scar a testament to a violent past. His hand rose, fingertips grazing the raised, pale line on his face. Because I understand what it is to be judged solely for what you appear to be. A monster. A weapon. An heir to brutality. His eyes held mine, and in their mercury depths, I saw a reflection of my own lifelong hiding. Because Della showed me kindness when others offered only fear. And because I made her a promise before she fled. What promise? That if I ever found her child, I would offer sanctuary, not subjugation. His gaze was unwavering. I keep my promises, Clara. The way he spoke my name, with a deliberate, respectful weight, unmoored something inside me. I had no compass for this. All I had were the old rules of shadow and silence, and they were useless here. If I go with you, I ventured, practicality surfacing through the storm, what happens after? When you return to your mountains and I remain here, as Eliza's attendant once more. His expression darkened. Is that your wish? The question, so direct, so alien in its consideration of my desire, left me speechless. What did I want? My entire life had been a calculation of survival, of usefulness, of avoiding notice. Wanting was a luxury, a danger. I began, the words unfamiliar on my tongue. I started again. I want to understand what I am. Who I might be, if I were not always hiding. My mother left before she could teach me everything. I have been a ghost for so long, I am not certain I know how to be solid. Something profound softened in his eyes. It was not pity. It was recognition. Then perhaps, he said, his voice a low rumble in the vast night, it is time you stepped into the light. Another howl echoed up the mountainside, more urgent. We should go, he said, and extended his hand to me. Not to pull or command, but to escort. I stared at his outstretched palm, weathered and strong. To take it felt like crossing a threshold from which there was no return. I would be acknowledging everything he had said, stepping from the periphery into a blazing, uncertain center. I don't even know your name, I realized suddenly. In all the tumult, he had remained the Alpha King, a title, not a person. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features. Asher, he said. My name is Asher. Asher. It suited him. A name of substance and endurance, like the heartwood of an ancient tree, like the ash that remains after a cleansing fire. I took a breath that felt like my first. Then, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and certain, and he led me back down the path to where midnight waited, patient as night itself. The ride back was a silent communion. The terror and confusion had not vanished, but they had been joined by a precarious, burgeoning sense of clarity. Asher's revelations were a map to a country I had never known I belonged to, terrifying in its contours, yet offering a destination other than the endless, shadowed corridor I had inhabited. I found myself leaning into the solid warmth of his chest without the earlier resistance, the rhythm of midnight's stride a lulling counterpoint to the chaos in my mind. The forest blurred past, a tunnel leading back to a world that had irrevocably changed. As we neared the ceremonial grounds, the evidence of the attack became starkly visible in the moonlight. Several outlying storage sheds were charred skeletons, their blackened ribs pointing at the sky. Wolves in both forms moved like ghosts through the wreckage, carrying the wounded, shoring up defenses. The scent of smoke, blood, and fear hung heavy, overlaying the earlier fragrances of celebration. Asher guided midnight toward the main hall, which stood intact but bore the scars of conflict, deep gouges in its heavy doors, dark stains on the timbered porch. Outside, a tense circle of figures stood in a pool of torchlight. The alphas of the 5 packs, flanked by their highest-ranking betas. The air around them crackled with suppressed anger and grim urgency. As we dismounted, I spotted Eliza emerging from a group of sheltered females near the hall's entrance. Her eyes, wide with relief, found me. Clara, she called, starting forward. Then her steps faltered as her gaze landed on Asher, standing protectively close. Her expression shifted from relief to a complex mix of confusion and dawning, chilly comprehension. My alpha is expecting you, she said to Asher, lowering her eyes in proper deference, but her tone was tight. I am aware, Asher replied, his voice cool. Clara attends with me. Eliza's gaze snapped to mine, shock erasing her careful composure. But she is a valued attendant of my household, she finished weakly, the correction clearly forced. Asher's hand came to rest lightly on the small of my back, a gesture both supportive and possessive. She is a valued member of my entourage now. The council awaits. I saw the protest forming on Eliza's lips, the questions, the hurt. I will explain later, I promised her quietly, though I had no idea what such an explanation could possibly entail. Her eyes narrowed, a flash of her father's calculating nature surfacing. My father will have thoughts on this. Your father's thoughts are not my concern, Asher stated dismissively, guiding me away toward the gathered leaders. As we walked, I whispered, you are making powerful enemies for me. You already had them, he replied, his voice low. They simply did not consider you significant enough to acknowledge. Now they must. Before I could dwell on that chilling observation, we reached the circle. Conversation died as we approached. All eyes turned first to Asher, then with palpable, bewildered curiosity to me. My own alpha, Kent of the Southern Woods Pack, stepped forward. A broad, solid man in his 5th decade, his hair more silver than black, he wore his authority like a well-fitted cloak. His expression was carefully neutral, but his gaze held a penetrating question as it rested on me. "King Asher," he greeted formally. We were about to commence. "Then our timing is fortuitous," Asher replied smoothly. Alpha Kent's eyes lingered on me. "Perhaps your companion would be more comfortable awaiting the council's decisions inside with the other attendants." Asher's hand pressed a fraction more firmly against my back. "Clara remains." A ripple of muted exclamations traveled through the assembled leaders. I caught fragments. "Who is she?" "A handmaiden, surely. Why does the Northern King?" Alpha Kent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he gave a stiff nod. "As you wish." He turned to address the circle. "The rogue force has taken 7. 2 from my pack, 3 from the Eastern Vale, 1 from the River Run, and 1 from the mountain ridge." He paused, his gaze sweeping the group. "None from the Northern Territories." An observation, not an accusation, yet it hung in the air, heavy with implication. One of the other alphas, a lean, fierce-eyed man from the mountain ridge, gave voice to it. "The Northern contingent arrived last and was positioned furthest from the main assault." "A fortunate placement." "Are you suggesting my pack had foreknowledge of this attack?" Asher's query was deceptively soft, but the temperature around us seemed to plunge. I felt the subtle shift in his stance, the coiled readiness of a predator assessing a threat. "No one suggests anything," Alpha Kent interjected quickly, though I heard the same undercurrent of suspicion in his reasonable tone. "We seek only to understand and to respond." He gestured to a map unfurled on a trestle table beside them. "We have tracked them to the Dark Hollow. It is a defensible position, difficult to approach unseen." "We strike at first light," declared the Mountain Ridge Alpha, a younger man named Torvin. "Before they move the captives deeper into the wildlands." "A direct assault risks the hostages' lives," countered the River Run Alpha, an older woman named Sella with auburn hair streaked like river sediment. She spoke with a calm that commanded attention. "We require a more subtle strategy." As the debate swirled, my attention was drawn to the map. It depicted the 5 pack territories radiating from a central point like petals, with the unclaimed lands including the jagged gash labeled Dark Hollow forming a dark border between them all. A nagging realization began to form. Without conscious thought, I stepped forward to study it more closely. The conversation stuttered to a halt. All eyes turned to me, a mixture of irritation, curiosity, and outright disapproval on their faces. "What does she?" someone muttered. I felt Asher move to stand beside me, his presence a bulwark. "You see something," he stated. I nodded, my mouth dry. With a trembling finger, I traced the border of the hollow. It touches the edges of all 5 territories. If they are establishing a base there, they are not just hiding. They are positioning themselves to strike anywhere. At anyone. Alpha Kent's brow furrowed as he leaned over the map. "A central, adversarial position. A threat to all packs equally." "But why take females?" Sella asked, her shrewd eyes on me. "Rogues raid for food, weapons. This is different. Rogues do not typically demonstrate the coordination we witnessed tonight, either," Asher added, his hand coming to rest lightly on my shoulder. The contact sent a jolt through me, but also a strange steadiness. "What is your thought, Clara?" The use of my name, the direct invitation to speak before this assembly of legends, stole my breath. I swallowed. What if they are not rogues at all? What if they are attempting to found a new pack? A profound silence fell over the group. "A new pack?" Sella repeated slowly. "That has not happened in generations. The territories are settled." "It would explain the taking of females," I pressed, emboldened by Asher's silent support. "And the coordinated attack. They are not merely surviving. They are building, recruiting, or conscripting." "If this is true," said the Eastern Vale Alpha, a sharp-featured man named Kale, "it is a greater threat than random violence. A new pack would contest all our borders, shatter every treaty." "The girl presents a valid point," Alpha Kent conceded, though he carefully avoided looking at me. "But such an endeavor requires leadership. An alpha of significant strength and ambition. Who could it be?" "Varen," Asher said. The name landed among them like a stone in a still pond. I saw recognition and immediate alarm flash across every face. "Varen is dead," Torvin stated firmly. "Your father executed him for treason 15 years past." A body was never recovered, Asher countered, his voice grim. And the tactics tonight, the diversion, the precision, the targeting of females of breeding age, they bear his mark. Alpha Kent's face darkened. If Varen lives and seeks to build a rival power, we face a problem of an entirely different magnitude. Who is Varen? I whispered to Asher. My father's former beta, he replied quietly, for my ears alone. A wolf of cunning and profound cruelty. His ambition was a poison. If he leads this, it is not a pack they are building. It is a legion. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air seized me. The thought of such a man holding 7 women captive was a horror beyond simple battle. We must confirm his involvement before we act, Sela insisted. To charge in blind against a mind like Varen's is to invite slaughter. And how do you propose we confirm it? Torvin demanded. Send a delegation with a polite inquiry. We need someone who can approach without raising an alarm, Alpha Kent mused, his gaze drifting thoughtfully over the map. Someone who might observe, gather information. I could go. The words left my mouth before my mind could fully cage them. Every head swiveled toward me. Expressions ranged from shock to incredulity to outright scorn. Absolutely not, Asher said immediately, his hand tightening on my shoulder. I turned to face him, a sudden, fierce determination overriding my fear. Consider it. They will not see me as a threat. I do not carry the obvious bearing of a warrior. I could approach as a human, lost, separated from a traveling party. It is too dangerous, he insisted, his silver eyes flashing with something that looked like fear. It is, in fact, a strategically sound suggestion, Alpha Kent said slowly, his evaluating gaze sweeping over me. Clara has always been different. Her manner is less overtly woven. With preparation, she could pass as human. Asher went very still beside me. You know, he said to Alpha Kent, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You have always known what she is. Alpha Kent did not flinch. We had our suspicions. Her mother was vague, but Clara has served loyally. We provided shelter in return. Shelter. Asher's laugh was a short, cold sound. You used her. Kept her ignorant of her lineage. You saw a convenient tool and nothing more. This debate is for another time. Sela's voice cut through the tension like a knife. We have 7 lives in the balance. If Clara is willing to aid, and if her unique nature makes her the best instrument for the task, we must consider it. She is not willing, Asher stated flatly. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. I am. The conflict in his eyes was raw and startling. Clara, you do not owe them this. All my life, I said quietly, holding his look, my worth has been measured by my usefulness. My ability to blend, to serve, to be overlooked. Let me use that now. Let me use what I am to do something only I can do. This is not about proving your worth to them, he argued, his voice low and intense. Isn't it? I countered. You told me to stop hiding. To embrace both halves. My human half could be the key to saving those women. You vowed to protect me. Then help me do this safely. But do not ask me to stand aside. For a long moment, he simply looked at me. I saw the alpha warring with the man, the strategist with the protector. Then, to my surprise, the corner of his mouth quirked in a reluctant, grim smile. You have your mother's particular brand of stubbornness. He turned back to the council. Clara will attempt to gather intelligence. But not alone. My warriors will be positioned within immediate reach, and she approaches no closer than we agree upon, with multiple paths of retreat. Alpha Kent nodded, looking both relieved and newly thoughtful. Agreed. We plan immediately. As the alphas broke into urgent discussion, Asher guided me a few steps away. Are you certain? He asked, searching my face. There is no shame in changing your mind. I shook my head. The path ahead was terrifying, but for the first time, it felt like a path I had chosen. I have spent a lifetime hiding from what I am. Maybe it is time I used it? Something that might have been pride flickered in his expression. Della would say the same. He glanced toward the planning alphas, then back at me. Stay close while they devise the scheme. Every detail matters. I nodded, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, but my resolve a newly forged piece of steel within. Dawn was a pale, reluctant promise on the horizon when the council's plan solidified. I stood at the edge of the northern camp, the world holding its breath in the grey pre-light. The borrowed clothes soft, earth-toned human trousers and a loose tunic felt alien against my skin, a costume for a role I had to embody completely. My hair was bound in a simple, practical braid. At my hip hung a leather satchel, its contents meticulously chosen, bundles of dried yarrow and comfrey, a small mortar and pestle, a water skin, and hidden within a seam, the signaling mirror and the pouch of crushed mountain ash berries. My mother's pendant rested openly against my collarbone. The northern warriors moved with quiet efficiency around me, checking weapons, exchanging terse words. They treated my presence with a wary respect, accepting Asher's decree without question, though I often caught their curious glances. I was an anomaly in their disciplined world, a fragile-looking variable in a deadly equation. Asher approached, his own knight of strategy showing only in the slight tightness around his eyes. He carried something in his hands, a sheath knife. It was slender, the leather of its scabbard worn smooth with age, the handle wrapped in dark cord. For the moment when all else fails, he said, his voice gravelly with lack of sleep. He offered it to me. The blade is silvered. It will bite true against our kind, if such a choice is forced upon you. I took it carefully. The handle fit perfectly in my palm. As I examined it, I saw the familiar pattern etched into the metal pommel, a crescent moon surrounded by interlocking vines. The twin to my pendant. This is northern craftsmanship, I breathed. It belonged to Della, he confirmed, watching my face. I have carried it since her departure, hoping one day to return it to her blood. His gaze was intent. It seems that day has arrived. The weight of the blade was more than physical. It was a legacy, a weapon, a symbol of a heritage I was only beginning to grasp. I secured it carefully inside my boot, the cool metal a stark reminder against my ankle. Remember, Asher continued, stepping closer. The camp around us seemed to fade. Your humanity is not your vulnerability here. It is your disguise. Think as a human thinks, fearful of the dark woods, ignorant of packways, concerned with herbs and healing. That mind will shield you where a wolf's instincts might betray you. I nodded, trying to absorb his certainty, to let it fortify my own fraying nerves. And if it is Varen? What marks him, besides his cruelty? Asher's jaw tightened. His eyes. One is the blue of glacier ice, the other the amber of a wolf at hunt. And around his right wrist, he bears a tattoo, a band of interlocking wolf teeth, as if bitten into his flesh. A souvenir from his first betrayal. I committed the details to memory, the mismatched gaze, the grim bracelet. What if, the doubt I had kept at bay finally breached my defenses? What if I cannot maintain the guise? What if my wolf is too close to the surface, or my fear makes me seem wrong? To my astonishment, Asher's hand rose. His fingers brushed my cheek, a fleeting, gentle contact that sent a cascade of warmth through the morning's chill. Clara, he said, my name a soft anchor in the rising tide of my anxiety. You have survived for years in a den that was never truly yours. You have preserved your spirit in a place that sought to make you small. Do not doubt the strength that required. It is a different strength from the kind that shatters bone, but it is no less formidable. His silver eyes held mine, unwavering. Trust in that. His faith was a tangible thing, a cloak of courage offered when my own had grown thin. I will not fail, I promised, the words for him, for the captives, and for myself. Just return, he said, the simplicity of the command belying its depth. That is the only mission that truly matters. Alpha Kent approached then, his arrival breaking the fragile bubble of the moment. It is time, he announced, his gaze analytically sweeping over my prepared form. Our scouts report minimal movement in the hollow. They will be weary from the night's work. I took a steadying breath, the cool air sharp in my lungs. I am ready. Recall your story, Kent instructed, falling into the role of strategist. You are an herbalist from the eastern human settlement beyond the Stoneback Mountains. You were separated from your foraging party 2 days ago and have been wandering since. You are desperate for aid. You know nothing of wolves beyond fables. And if they sent the wolf in me? The wolf's bane paste, he said, gesturing to a small clay pot in my satchel. A last resort. It will burn like acid and mask your scent for less than an hour. Use it only if discovery is imminent. I touched the pot through the leather, a tiny chamber of potential agony. I understand. The signal for confirming Varen or locating the captives is 3 flashes of the mirror toward the Sunstone Peak, he continued, pointing to a distinct, flat-topped rock formation visible on the eastern ridge. Our scouts will be watching. If you are taken, if you must trigger a rescue, burn the ash berries. The purple smoke will be our call to arms. Asher's expression was granite. My warriors will be here, here, and here. He indicated points on a mental map between us. Closer than the others. And I will be with them. Alpha Kent looked as if he might protest the Northern King inserting himself so directly into the tactical line, but something in Asher's stance made him reconsider. He gave a curt nod. Very well. We move on your signal, Clara. With final nods, Alpha Kent returned to his own warriors. Asher remained for a moment longer, his presence a silent question. I will see you at the Sunstone Peak, I said, the words feeling like a vow. You will, he agreed. Then, he turned and melted into the gathering gloom of the forest, joining his waiting men. I was alone. Or as alone as one could be with a company of hidden warriors and a destiny balanced on a knife's edge. Adjusting the strap of my satchel, I began to walk. The journey was a lesson in transformation. With each step away from the camp, I shed Clara the half-blood handmaiden and began to weave the reality of Clara the lost human. I let my footsteps fall heavier, less fluid. I allowed my gaze to sweep the forest floor with a forager's intent, not a scout's alertness, missing the subtle signs a wolf would note: the disturbed moss, the distant snap of a twig that was not an animal. I softened my posture, introducing a slight, weary slump to my shoulders. By the time the first tendrils of wood smoke and the faint, unwashed musk of a large group reached me, the transformation felt complete. I was a woman alone and afraid in a vast, unknown wood. I deliberately trod on a dry branch. The crack was loud in the morning stillness. I let out a gasp, then called, my voice pitched high with manufactured fear. Hello? Is someone there? Please, I need help. Movement was immediate. 2 men emerged from behind the thick boles of ancient pines. They were large, their clothing rough, their eyes holding the focused, predatory stillness of wolves in human skin. They flanked me without a word, their assessment cold and swift. Well, now, the taller one drawled, a smirk twisting his lips. What's a tender little thing like you doing so deep in the wailing wood? I wrapped my arms around myself, letting a believable tremor run through me. Thank the spirits. I've been lost for days. I'm an herbalist, from the East Fold settlement. I was gathering dusk bloom and lost my way. I gestured helplessly to my satchel. The shorter one stepped uncomfortably close, his nose twitching as he inhaled near my hair. I flinched back, a reaction that was only partly feigned. Smells, odd, he grunted to his companion. Sweet, like herbs. But there's something underneath. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I forced my hand to stay away from the wolf's bane. Please, I begged, layering desperation into my tone. I have medicines. I can trade. I just need food and directions back to the Sun Road. The tall one's smirk widened. Oh, we'll take you to camp, little healer. Our leader has a fondness for useful things. He gestured forward with his chin. Move. They fell in on either side of me, close enough that I could feel the heat of their bodies, and led me down into the heart of the dark hollow. As we walked, I mapped the path with the terrified human's fleeting, frantic glances, noting the positions of 3 separate sentry points, marking where the undergrowth was trampled, where the air smelled of latrines and old fires. The camp itself was a shock. It was not a temporary hideout, but a burgeoning settlement. Dozens of shelters, from crude lean-tos to more substantial log and hide constructions, clustered around a central clearing dominated by a massive fire pit. Wolves moved with purpose, sharpening weapons, mending gear, hauling supplies. This was not a band of outcasts. It was the foundation of something ambitious and terrible. My escorts led me to the largest shelter, a structure of stitched hides over a sturdy timber frame. Wait, the tall one ordered, ducking inside. While he was gone, I scanned the clearing. My eyes found what I sought near the far western edge, a sturdy cage of lashed-together logs, guarded by 2 armed men who faced both outward and inward. A prison. The captives were there. The guard emerged. He'll see you. Don't speak unless spoken to. Taking a breath that did nothing to calm me, I stepped into the dim, smoky interior. The shelter was a cave of shadows and shifting amber light from a low fire. The air was thick with the scent of cured hide, wood smoke, and a pungent, musky odor that spoke of many wolves living in close quarters. My eyes adjusted slowly, picking out the shape of a man seated on a rough-hewn chair that served as a throne. He was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, studying me as one might examine a strange insect. A human herbalist, he mused, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone that was utterly at odds with the savage surroundings. Wandering lost into my lap. How remarkably convenient. As he pushed himself to his feet and stepped into the firelight, I had to consciously force the breath to keep moving in and out of my lungs. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with high cheekbones and a lean, powerful build. But it was his eyes that confirmed everything. One was a clear, piercing blue, like the heart of a winter sky. The other was a warm, tawny amber, the exact shade of a wolf's eye caught in torchlight. Varen. I dropped my gaze immediately, feigning the cowering awe a human would feel. Please, sir, I stammered, layering a quaver into my voice. I just need. I know what you think you need, he interrupted, beginning to circle me with a panther's silent grace. The question I find more interesting is what I might need from you. He completed his circuit, stopping directly in front of me. His mismatched eyes raked over me, missing nothing. An herbalist could prove valuable. We have injuries. And we have guests who must remain in good health. Guests? I asked, allowing confusion to wrinkle my brow. His lips curled in a smile that held no warmth. 7 lovely she-wolves who will be the foundation of my new dynasty, once they understand their place in it. He reached out, and with a single, cold finger, lifted my chin, forcing me to meet that bizarre, chilling gaze. There is a familiarity about you. A scent, not quite human. Not quite wolf. It tingles at the edge of my memory. Ice water flooded my veins. Had some rumor of Della's half-blood child reached even him? I quickly averted my eyes again, looking at the ground near his feet. I am nobody, sir. Just a healer who lost her way. He released my chin with a dismissive flick. We shall see. For now, you will attend to our guests. Ensure they are fit for purpose. Their deaths would be inconvenient. This was the opportunity one had hoped for, yet the casual cruelty in his words made my stomach clench. I will need my herbs, I said, gesturing to my satchel. Varen nodded to the guard who had brought me in. Search it? Rough hands grabbed the bag, upending its contents onto a filthy hide on the floor. My heart thundered as he pawed through the bundles of yarrow, the mortar, the water skin. His fingers probed the seams, but the hidden compartment, sewn with such care by one of the southern pack's quiet seamstresses, went undetected. The mirror and the ashberries remained secret. Nothing of threat, the guard grunted. Take her to the females, Varen commanded. Watch her. Every move. The 2 guards escorted me across the clearing. As we passed the central fire pit, I noted its construction, the piles of dry fuel nearby. The path to the cage was etched into my mind. The structure was even more grim up close, a crude box of logs lashed together with thick rope, barely tall enough to stand in. The 2 guards outside watched our approach with blank faces. One of them pulled open a heavy wooden door, its hinges screaming in protest. 1 hour, he growled, shoving me inside before slamming it shut. The interior was dim, the air stale and thick with despair. 7 women huddled on thin pallets of moldy straw. Some bore visible marks, bruises blossoming on pale skin, a swollen eye, a wrist held at an awkward angle. Others simply stared into nothingness, their spirits seemingly already broken. They were of different packs, their clothing ranging from fine ceremonial gowns now torn and dirty to simpler tunics. As the guard's shadow blocked the slat light from the door, I knelt beside the nearest captive, a young woman with dark hair cradling her wrist. I made a show of gently palpating the injury, a sprain, likely painful but not broken. As I pretended to examine it, I leaned close, my voice a breath against her ear. I am sent from the 5 packs. Help is coming. Her eyes, dull with pain, flickered to mine for a fraction of a second. A spark of life, quickly veiled. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. When the moon is at its peak tonight, I whispered, barely moving my lips as I rummaged in my now-returned satchel for a strip of cloth to bind her wrist. Be ready. I moved from one woman to the next, offering sips of water from my skin, applying poultices of crushed comfort to bruises, all the while delivering the same whispered message. None reacted overtly. They were daughters of warriors and diplomats, they understood the danger. Their silence was their agreement. I confirmed that while battered and terrified, all 7 were alive and, with the exception of 2 who had deeper leg wounds, capable of moving when the time came. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Finally, the door screeched open again. Time's up. The Alpha wants you. I was brought back before Varen. He was picking at a haunch of meat, his mismatched eyes lifting as I entered. Well. They need clean water, I reported, keeping my tone professionally detached. And better food. 2 have injuries that require ongoing care, 1 a deep gash to the leg that risks fever. I would like to prepare poultices and fetch fresh moss for binding. Varen studied me, a piece of meat suspended halfway to his mouth. You show remarkable concern for wolves, healer. Most of your kind would tremble at the sight of us. I am a servant of life, I said, the words my mother had often used coming unbidden to my lips. Pain and infection are my enemies, no matter the skin they wear. He set the meat down, wiping his fingers on his trousers. A cold, calculating interest gleamed in his dual-colored gaze. A noble sentiment. You may gather what you need. But understand this: your path does not lead back to your east fold. Your skills are now assets of my new pack. You will remain. The finality in his voice sent a jolt of pure fear through me. My freedom, the tentative promise of a future with choices, was being erased with the sentence. I forced a stiff nod. I understand. Thank you for your protection. He waved a dismissive hand. A young female warrior with a scar across her cheek stepped forward. Escort her. She gathers plants. Do not let her from your sight. The warrior gave a sharp nod and motioned for me to follow. We walked to the edge of the clearing where the forest began to reclaim the land. I pointed to a cluster of small, yellow flowers growing in a patch of sunlight. Feverbane, I said, my voice flat. And I need the inner bark from a north-facing elder. It's for the poultices. She crossed her arms, her stance clear: gather, but don't wander. This was my only chance. Kneeling, I began to pluck the yellow flowers, my back to her and the camp. My movements were slow, methodical, a forager's careful harvest. With my body blocking her view, I slipped my hand into the satchel, my fingers finding the cool surface of the mirror. I angled it carefully, catching the morning sun, and directed the beam toward the distant, flat silhouette of the sunstone peak. Flash. 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 Varen confirmed. Flash, flash. Captives located. Then, a slow, deliberate circular motion with the mirror, attack at moonrise. I had just slipped the mirror back into its hidden pocket when a shadow fell over me. I looked up, expecting the female warrior. Instead, I found myself staring into the blue and amber eyes of Varen. He stood silently, having approached with supernatural quiet. His expression was a mask of cold fury. Did you truly believe, he hissed, his voice dripping with venomous amusement, that I would not have watchers in the trees? Before I could react, his hand shot out, closing around my upper arm with a grip that felt like iron bands. He yanked me to my feet. I knew there was a wrongness about you from the moment I smelled you. He dragged me close, his nose buried against my neck, inhaling deeply. Then he recoiled, shoving me away with a snarl of disgust. Wolf, he spat. But not a true one. A mongrel. A half-blood abomination. Terror threatened to drown me, but beneath it, a defiant anger surged. I was done being ashamed. I met his furious, bizarre gaze. Better a half-blood, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, than a traitor who preys on women to build his vanity. Rage contorted his handsome features into something monstrous. You will scream for those words before the sun sets. As he hauled me back toward the camp, I managed to twist, my hand plunging into the satchel. Not for the mirror, but for the pouch of mountain ash berries. As we passed the central fire pit, I threw the pouch with all my strength into the heart of the flames. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a muffled whump, a plume of vivid, unnatural purple smoke erupted skyward, thick and billowing, a signal visible for leagues. Varen's roar of pure, incandescent fury was drowned out by a sound that shook the very leaves on the trees, a unified, answering howl of dozens of wolves, a chorus of vengeance erupting from the forest on all sides. The last thing I saw before Varen's fist connected with my temple, plunging the world into dizzying blackness, was a massive, midnight-furred wolf with eyes of molten silver crashing through the tree line, leading a tide of northern fury straight into the heart of the camp. Consciousness returned not gently, but in a jagged burst of sensory chaos. Sound first, a cacophony of snarls, the clash of steel on steel, shrieks of pain, and the guttural shouts of fighting men. Then smell, the iron-rich scent of blood, the acrid bite of smoke, the raw, wild odor of wolves in battle frenzy. Finally, feeling, a throbbing ache at my temple where Varen's blow had landed, the hard, cold ground beneath me. I opened my eyes to a world of violence. I was lying near the now scattered remnants of the central fire, the purple smoke long since dissipated. The camp was a maelstrom. Northern wolves, both in their majestic, fearsome animal forms and as armed warriors, clashed with Varen's followers. The discipline of his force had shattered under the sudden, ferocious assault, dissolving into a brutal, chaotic melee. A snarling wolf, its muzzle matted with gore, lunged over me, locking jaws with a rogue in human form. I scrambled backward, my hand instinctively going to my boot, closing around the cool hilt of Della's knife. I had no skill for this kind of fighting, but the weapon was a sliver of sanity in the madness. A shadow fell over me. I looked up, expecting another combatant. Instead, it was midnight. The great stallion stood protectively, his hooves planted on either side of me, his head lowered, teeth bared at any who came near. Asher had sent him. He was my island in the storm. Through the chaos, I caught flashes of the battle's narrative. The northern warriors fought with a chilling, coordinated efficiency, working in pairs and trios to isolate and overwhelm Varen's men. I saw Thorn, Asher's beta, in wolf form, a massive, gray-furred beast ripping a weapon from a rogue's hand before pinning him with a crushing paw. But my eyes searched for only one form. I found him near the log prison. Asher, in his full lupin glory, was a creature of legend. His wolf was even larger than I'd imagined, his fur the pure, deep black of a starless night, save for a streak of silver at his chest that matched the scar on his human face. His eyes burned with that same mercury fire. He fought not with mindless rage, but with a terrifying, calculated grace. He moved like liquid shadow, dodging a spear thrust, disarming a swordsman with a snap of his jaws, using his immense size and power to break formations and create openings for his warriors. He was clearing a path to the cage. Two of Varen's guards lay motionless nearby. With a powerful swipe of a clawed paw, he shattered the rope hinge of the door. A northern warrior in human form, a female with braids wrapped tightly around her head, darted inside, urging the captive women out. They emerged, blinking and terrified, but moving, supporting the injured, their faces etched with a desperate hope. Asher's wolf turned, his burning gaze sweeping the camp. It found me, pinned under Midnight's guard. I saw the recognition, the minute relaxation in his powerful shoulders. The captives were safe. One objective achieved. Then, a voice cut through the din, cold and precise. So, the Pup King comes to play at hero. Varen stood atop a large, flat rock at the edge of the clearing. He had not shifted. In his hand, he held a long, cruel-looking blade that seemed to drink the light. His mismatched eyes were fixed on Asher, gleaming with a venomous delight. All around, the fighting seemed to dim, the combatants of both sides pulling back slightly, creating a circle. This was the heart of the conflict, alpha to alpha. Asher shifted. It was not a slow, painful transformation, but a seamless flow of muscle and bone. One moment, the colossal black wolf stood there, the next, Asher rose to his full height in human form, naked but for the scars and the aura of absolute authority that clothed him more completely than any garment. He did not reach for a weapon. He was the weapon. Varen, Asher said, his voice carrying easily. I should have known the rot had not been fully scraped from the world. You lack your father's thoroughness, Varen sneered, leaping down from the rock with panther-like agility. He understood that to kill a weed, you must burn its roots. You left a root, little king. And now it has grown thorns. It has grown nothing but lies and suffering, Asher countered, beginning to circle. This ends now. Your pack is a sham built on theft and fear. It is built on the future. Varen spat, his composure cracking to reveal the fanaticism beneath. The old packs are weak, clinging to territory and tradition while the world changes. I will unite the outcasts, the strong who are stifled by your hierarchies. And I will start. His dual-colored gaze flicked to the huddled group of rescued females, then to me, with the strongest stock. The insult, the reduction of living beings to breeding stock, was a spark to tinder. Asher moved. He didn't charge like a beast. He advanced like a force of nature, closing the distance with deceptive speed. Varen met him, his blade a silver arc in the morning light. Asher dodged, the edge whispering past his ribs. He didn't attempt to grapple, he used his open hands like weapons, deflecting a second strike, delivering a hammer blow to Varen's forearm that made the traitor snarl and the blade dip. It was a brutal, mesmerizing dance. Varen was all cunning and precision, his knife-seeking vulnerabilities. Asher was raw power and controlled fury, every movement economical, designed to disarm and disable. They were a study in opposites, the cold, calculated traitor versus the righteous, devastating king. I watched, frozen, my knuckles white around the knife hilt. Midnight stamped, his attention fixed on the duel. Around the circle, warriors from both sides stood transfixed, knowing the outcome would decide everything. Varen feinted low, then swept his blade upward toward Asher's throat. Asher caught the wrist, the muscles in his arm cord with strain. For a moment, they were locked, a statue of struggle. Varen's free hand shot out, fingers clawed, aiming for Asher's eyes. Asher jerked his head aside, releasing the wrist and driving his forehead forward into Varen's face. There was a sickening crunch. Varen stumbled back, blood streaming from his nose. He laughed, a wet, horrible sound, and spat crimson onto the ground. "The savage prince," he taunted, wiping his mouth. "Just like your father." "I am nothing like my father," Asher growled, the words freighted with a lifetime of defiance. He sought power for its own sake. "I bear it for the protection of my people." You are his true heir. A hollow creature who understands only taking." The words struck deeper than any physical blow. Varen's mad glee vanished, replaced by pure, undiluted hatred. He lunged again, but his technique was gone, replaced by wild, hacking strikes. Asher deflected, parried, waited. He was letting Varen exhaust himself, letting rage be his downfall. The opening came. Varen overextended on a furious thrust. Asher sidestepped, his hand closing on Varen's knife wrist once more. This time, there was a twist, a sharp, sickening pop. Varen screamed, the blade falling from nerveless fingers. Asher drove his other fist into Varen's midsection, doubling him over, then brought his knee up into the traitor's jaw. Varen collapsed, sprawled on the bloody ground, gasping, his unbroken hand clutching his ruined wrist. Asher stood over him, breathing heavily, his silver eyes like chips of winter ice. He looked at the defeated man, then at the gathered, silent warriors, his own standing proud, Varen's looking lost and terrified. "The root is burned," Asher declared, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. He looked to Thorn. "Bind him. He will answer to the Council of Alphas for his crimes." It was over. The fight bled out of Varen's followers. Some dropped their weapons. A few tried to flee into the forest, only to be quickly run down by northern wolves. The structure of the would-be pack dissolved into dust. Asher turned from the broken Alpha and his gaze found me again. He began walking toward where I still crouched under Midnight's guard. The fierce mask of the warrior king softened, replaced by an expression of such intense relief and concern that it stole the air from my lungs. He had just fought a legendary duel, secured a victory, and his focus was on me. He knelt before me, ignoring the carnage around us. His eyes scanned my face, lingering on the bruise already forming at my temple. His fingers, which had just broken bone, reached out with infinite care, hovering near the injury without touching it. "You are hurt." "It's nothing," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "The women are safe. Thanks to you." His gaze dropped to the knife still clutched in my hand, to the crescent moon on its pommel. "You did not need to use it." I had other signals to send. I managed a weak smile. A true smile, small but breathtaking in its sincerity, touched his lips. "You were magnificent." He rose and offered me his hand. "Come. Let us leave this place of shadows." I took his hand, his strong fingers closing around mine, and let him pull me to my feet. As we stood there amidst the wreckage of Varen's ambition, with the rescued women being tended to and the dawn sun finally breaking fully over the ridge, I felt the last of my old ghostly life fall away. I was solid. I was seen. and for the first time, the path ahead, though still shrouded in mist, felt like my own to walk. The journey back from the dark hollow was a somber procession, a world away from the frantic, moonlit ride that had begun the night. The wounded, both rescued captives and warriors from the brief, vicious fight, were carried on litters or supported by their comrades. The air, once sharp with the promise of violence, was now heavy with the sense of blood, sweat, and exhaustion. Varen, bound and gagged, was dragged along under the grim watch of 4 northern warriors, his mismatched eyes burning with impotent fury. I walked beside Asher, though beside was a generous term. He was a pace ahead, a focal point of quiet command, issuing low-voiced orders to Thorn, checking on the injured, his presence a stabilizing force. Yet, every few minutes, his gaze would find me, a silent check-in that sent a warm current through the pervasive chill. Midnight followed at our heels, a vigilant shadow. The rescued women were clustered together, wrapped in borrowed cloaks. Their initial terror had subsided into a shell-shock silence, but their eyes, when they lifted them, held a new, hard-won light. The girl with the sprained wrist caught my eye as we passed and gave the barest nod of gratitude. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a stone settling in the foundation of a new reality. As we neared the ceremonial grounds, the scale of the previous night's main attack became fully visible. The Southern Woods Pack and their allies were deep in the work of recovery. Funeral pyres sent columns of gray smoke into the pale sky. The injured filled makeshift shelters, and the sounds of rebuilding, the steady thunk of hammers, the rasp of saws, formed a grim counterpoint to the natural forest sounds. Our arrival caused a stir. Warriors paused in their work, their eyes widening at the sight of the northern force returning with captives in tow and a bound prisoner. But more than the spectacle, I felt their stares land on me. Whispers rustled through the crowd like dry leaves. "Is that Clara? The handmaiden? With the northern king? They say she went into the hollow. They say she found Varen." I kept my gaze fixed ahead, my back straight, clinging to the solid feeling Asher's confidence had given me. But the weight of their scrutiny was a palpable thing, a pressure against my newfound sense of self. The circle of alphas had reconvened outside the main hall. They watched our approach, their expressions a complex tapestry of relief, wariness, and sharp curiosity. Alpha Kent stepped forward, his eyes cataloging our group, the prisoners, finally landing on me with an assessment that felt like being weighed on a new, unfamiliar scale. "King Asher," Kent greeted. "Your return is welcome. And successful, it seems." "Varen's ambition is ended," Asher stated, gesturing to where the traitor was being forced to his knees. "His followers are scattered or captured. The stolen ones are returned." His hand came to rest lightly on my shoulder. Thanks in no small part to Clara's courage and intelligence. All eyes turned to me. I felt Eliza's gaze from where she stood with her father, Beta Renard. It was no longer confused or hurt, but cool, analytical, the look of a politician recalculating the value of a piece on the board. "The council will convene to determine Varen's fate," Sella of Riveron said, her voice carrying authority. "His crimes are against all packs. Justice must be collective." "Agreed," Asher nodded. "But first, the wounded must be seen to. My healers will assist." As the alphas began discussing logistics, I found myself momentarily separate from the flow of command. It was then that Eliza approached. She was immaculate, as always, her ceremonial gown exchanged for a practical but finely made dress. There was no trace of the previous night's fear on her face, only a poised, polite inquiry. "Clara," she said, her voice carefully modulated. "You look, well, considering." Her eyes flicked to the bruise on my temple. "Eliza," I replied, unsure of what tone to take. The mistress-servant dynamic was shattered, but nothing had yet taken its place. "My father and Alpha Kent are most interested in your account of events," she continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "A handmaiden turning intelligence agent is quite the tale. I trust the Northern King did not find your service lacking." The subtle barb was expertly placed, questioning both my loyalty and my new position. Before I could formulate a response, a shadow fell over us. "Her service was exemplary," Asher said, appearing at my side. His voice was pleasant, but his silver eyes were cool as he looked at Eliza. "In fact, it has revealed a need for a reassessment of her standing. Clara's actions preserved the lives of 7 pack members and helped avert a war. Such merit cannot go unrecognized." Eliza's perfect composure wavered for a second. "Of course. The pack always rewards loyalty. She glanced between us, the calculation in her eyes almost audible. Will you be returning to our household then, Clara? I'm sure my father will wish to debrief you. It was a reclaiming, a subtle attempt to pull me back into the old hierarchy. I felt the ghost of my former self stir, the instinct to lower my eyes and murmur assent. But that ghost had no substance anymore. Clara's immediate future is a matter we will discuss, Asher said, his tone leaving no room for debate. After she has rested. He placed a guiding hand on my back. Come. You have earned a moment's peace. He led me away from Eliza, from the staring crowd, toward the quieter section where the northern camp was being re-established. As we walked, I could feel the thousand unspoken questions hanging in the air between us. We reached a spot near a quiet creek, away from the main bustle. He turned to face me. You feel their eyes, he stated. They see a ghost who learned to walk in daylight, I said quietly, looking down at the grass. They don't know what to make of me. What do you want them to see? He asked. The question was so simple, yet it unmoored me. For so long, I had wanted to be invisible. Now, I had a choice. I looked up, meeting his gaze. I want them to see someone who is not ashamed. Someone who belongs somewhere, even if that somewhere is, between. He nodded, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. Then that is what you will show them. But belonging is not given, Clara. It is claimed. You have claimed a place at this council, in this fight. The rest will follow. And after the council? After Varen's fate is decided? I asked, the practicalities looming. This is not my territory. The southern pack is my home, however imperfect. Is it? He asked gently. A home is where you are safe. Where you are known. Where you can grow into who you are meant to be. He gestured vaguely northward, toward the distant, snow-capped peaks. Your mother's blood calls from there. It is a harsh land, but an honest one. It does not punish difference, it tests strength. And I believe you have a strength it would recognize. He was offering it again, not as a vague promise, but as a tangible path. A choice. North. To the source of half my blood, to a world of unknown rules and challenges, under the protection of this formidable, puzzling king. I need to think, I said, the words feeling inadequate. Of course, he replied instantly, no pressure in his tone. There is no hurry. The council will last days. Stay. Observe. See how your old world looks to you now, with new eyes. He gave me a small, understanding smile. The half moon sees both the darkness and the light. Use that sight. He left me then, returning to the demands of leadership. I stood by the creek, listening to its gentle burble, feeling the cool breeze on my skin. The sounds of the pack my old pack carried on the wind, familiar voices, the rhythms of a life I knew intimately. But the melody was different now, or perhaps I was hearing a new harmony within it. I was no longer just Clara the handmaiden, the ghost. I was Clara, who had faced down Varen. Clara, whose word had been heard by alphas. Clara, who carried a northern knife and a legacy of moonlight. A figure approached from the direction of the southern lodges. It was an older woman, Quina, one of the pack's healers. She had always been kind to me in her brisk, no-nonsense way, treating my minor childhood scrapes without the suspicion others showed. Clara, she said, stopping a few feet away. She looked me over with a healer's eye, her gaze lingering on my bruise. That needs a poultice. Come to the healing tent. It was not a request from a mistress, but an instruction from one healer to another. A recognition of a shared purpose. I looked at her, then back toward the creek, toward the invisible line that separated the southern camp from the northern. I will, I said. Thank you, Quina. As I followed her toward the tents, I realized Asher was right. I was seeing with new eyes. And the first thing I saw was that I had more than one path to walk, and the strength to choose which one to take. The council to judge Varen was convened in the Great Hall, the same space that had so recently held the promise of union and now hosted an inquisition. The air was thick with a different tension, solemn, heavy, charged with the gravity of justice. The 5 alphas sat at a long table on the dais, a united front of authority. Behind them, their betas and highest-ranking warriors stood as silent witnesses. The rest of the hall was filled with pack members, a sea of attentive faces. I was given a seat at a smaller table to the right of the dais, a place of honor for a key witness. Asher sat with his northern contingent on the left side of the hall, a solid, imposing block. Our eyes met briefly across the space, a silent exchange of solidarity before the proceedings began. Varen was brought in, his wrists bound before him with thick rope, the tattoo of wolf teeth stark against his skin. The arrogance was still there, a brittle shell over the ruin of his ambitions. His mismatched eyes swept the room, lingering on Asher with pure hatred, on the Alphas with contempt, and finally, dismissively, on me. Alpha Kent, as host, spoke first. Varen, formerly Beta of the Northern Pack under King Baran, you stand accused by this United Council of multiple crimes: treason against your rightful Alpha, unlawful assault on sacred neutral ground, the murder of pack wolves from all 5 territories, and the kidnapping of 7 females with intent to enslave and coerce. How do you answer? Varen lifted his chin. I answer that I acted to build what you stagnant, tradition-bound fools cannot, a new order. The old packs are weak, divided by pointless borders and decaying bloodlines. I sought to unite the strong, to create a power worthy of this land. By stealing women. Sella's voice cut through, cold as mountain runoff. By slaughtering those who defended their homes. That is not strength. It is the act of a parasite. They are resources. Varen spat, his composure cracking. To build a dynasty? You sentimentalize them, but they are vessels for the future, just as land and warriors are tools. I would have used them to forge an empire. A ripple of disgust moved through the hall. His words laid bare the utter barrenness of his vision, a world of cold utility, devoid of loyalty, love, or pack bond. And your attack here? Torvin of the Mountain Ridge demanded. The mating ceremony is sacred to all. A perfect convergence, Varen said, a twisted smile on his lips. All the prized stock in one place, guarded by ritual instead of warriors. It was a tactical opportunity, nothing more. Your sacred is my convenient. The callousness was so profound it left a sickened silence in its wake. Alpha Kent then turned to me. Clara. You entered the dark hollow under disguise. Tell the council what you witnessed. Every eye turned to me. I felt the weight of the hall's attention, the expectation, the lingering doubt from some who still saw only a servant girl. I took a steadying breath, my fingers finding the edge of the table. I spoke clearly, my voice carrying without shrillness. I entered posing as a lost human herbalist. Varen accepted my presence, seeing me as a useful tool. He confirmed his intent with the captive females, referring to them as guests who would fulfill their purpose in building his pack. I met Varen's glare without flinching. He showed no concern for their well-being beyond their basic fitness for his goals. The camp was organized not as a rogue hideout, but as a permanent settlement, a planned stronghold from which to challenge all territories. Lies from a mongrel. Varen snarled. A half-blood whelp desperate for importance. A low growl rumbled from the northern side of the hall. Asher did not move, but the threat in the sound was unmistakable. Your opinion of the witness's bloodline is irrelevant, Kale of the Eastern Vale said sharply. We have the testimony of the rescued females, all of whom corroborate her account of their captivity and your intentions. He gestured, and the 7 women, standing together at the front of the crowd, nodded as one, their faces firm. Varen was isolated, his own words and actions testifying against him. The trial was less about determining guilt that was manifest and more about formally laying out the crimes for all to witness, to unite the packs in condemnation. We have heard enough, Alpha Kent said finally, his face grim. The council will deliberate on sentence. The Alphas withdrew to a private chamber. The hall erupted into muted conversation, the tension momentarily broken. I sat still, my role complete, feeling strangely drained. Asher caught my eye again and gave a slight, approving nod. The deliberation was not long. The Alphas returned, their expressions uniformly severe. Alpha Kent addressed the hall, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. The crimes of Varen are of such magnitude that they poison the very concept of pack. He has forfeited his place among the living. For treason, murder, and the profaning of our most sacred traditions, the sentence is death. It will be carried out at sundown, by the united hand of the 5 packs. A collective exhale moved through the crowd. It was expected, but its finality was profound. Varen showed no fear, only a bitter, defiant sneer. As he was led away, his dual-colored eyes locked on me one last time, a silent promise of undying malice that sent a chill down my spine, even in his defeat. As the council broke, the focus shifted from judgment to consequence. The alphas gathered again, this time joined by their betas, to discuss the fallout. I made to slip away, but Alpha Kent's voice stopped me. Clara. A moment. I turned. Asher, who had been approaching, paused a respectful distance away, watching. Alpha Kent studied me, his earlier calculation replaced by something more contemplative. Your actions required courage and intelligence. The pack owes you a debt. He paused, choosing his words. Your situation has changed. It is clear your service as a simple handmaiden is no longer appropriate. Beta Renard and I have spoken. We would offer you a formal position within the Beta's household, a liaison of sorts, given your unique experiences and newfound rapport with our northern allies. It was a generous offer by Southern standards. A promotion from invisible servant to a visible, if ambiguous, role. It was also a clever move keeping me close, using my connection to Asher as a diplomatic asset for the Southern pack. I glanced at Beta Renard, who gave a polite, unsurprised nod. Eliza, beside him, watched me with veiled eyes. It is a considerable honor, I said carefully, and I am grateful for Alpha Kent's recognition. But, he prompted, hearing the hesitation. I looked past him, to where Asher stood, a still point in the shifting room. Then I looked back at my Alpha, the man who had allowed me to live in the shadows of his pack for so long. But I believe I must decline. A flicker of surprise, then sharp interest, crossed his face. Beta Renard's eyebrows rose. Eliza's careful mask slipped for an instant, revealing sheer astonishment. May I ask why? Alpha Kent's voice was neutral. Because the offer, while honorable, still seeks to place me within a structure, I explained, finding the words as I spoke them. To define me by my utility to the pack. For years, that has been my entire existence. I need time to understand what I am, beyond what I can do for others. I gestured slightly toward the northern contingent. King Asher has offered me the chance to learn of my mother's heritage. To see the north. I believe I must accept that, first. Silence hung between us. I had just refused my Alpha, politely but firmly. In the old world, such a thing was unthinkable. Alpha Kent's gaze shifted from me to Asher and back. He sighed, a sound of reluctant understanding. You are not the girl who left here 2 nights ago. No, I agreed softly. I am not. He nodded slowly. Then go. Learn. The offer will remain, should your path bring you back to our territory. He gave me a long, appraising look. You have your mother's spirit, Clara. More than I ever realized. With that, he turned and rejoined the other leaders. The dismissal was clear, and final in its own way. I was no longer bound to them. I walked toward Asher. He had heard every word. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a quiet, fierce light. You chose, he said as I reached him. I chose a question over an answer, I corrected. For now, that is enough. It is everything, he replied. He glanced toward the departing Southern Alphas. You have impressed him. And you have unnerved him. A powerful combination. What happens now? I asked, the reality of my decision beginning to settle. With Varen, with the peace. Varen's death will be a message, Asher said, his voice low. But his ideas may have taken root in others. The Council will strengthen border treaties, increase patrols. The immediate threat is gone, but vigilance remains. He looked down at me. As for you, we leave for the north at first light. If you are still resolved. The north. The word was no longer just a direction, it was a realm of ice and legend, the source of my scarred companion and half my blood. It was a leap into the absolute unknown. I am resolved, I said, and found that I was. Sundown approached, staining the western sky in shades of blood orange and bruised purple. A solemn, grim energy permeated the ceremonial grounds. The execution of an alpha, even a disgraced one, was a rare and weighty event, a ritual of closure meant to purge a poison from the body of the packs. A cleared space had been designated at the edge of the forest, a stark, open circle of trampled grass. The members of all 5 packs formed a wide ring around it, their faces solemn. There was no thirst for spectacle here, only a collective, Somber acceptance of a necessary duty. I stood with the northern contingent. Asher was at their head, his expression carved from granite. He, along with the other 4 alphas, would carry out the sentence, a symbolic act of unity, ensuring no single pack bore the sole burden of vengeance. Varen was led into the circle. He had been stripped of his outer garments, standing in simple breeches, his arms bound behind him. The defiance had not left him, but it had hardened into a cold, silent scorn. His mismatched eyes scanned the ring of faces, lingering on each alpha with contempt. When his gaze passed over me, it was like being brushed by a corpse's hand, lifeless, yet carrying the chill of the grave. The alpha stepped forward into the circle, forming a smaller ring around him. No words were spoken. None were needed. The judgment had been given, this was its fulfillment. Asher moved first. Not with violence, but with a terrible, deliberate purpose. He shifted, the seamless flow from man to wolf occurring in the space of a heartbeat. The other alphas followed suit, Kent becoming a massive tawny wolf, Sela a sleek, silver-furred hunter, Torvin a shaggy, mountain-coated beast, Kale a lean, brindled shadow. 5 alpha wolves, representing the united strength of all territories, surrounded the traitor. Varen did not shift. He stood in his human form, facing his fate with a perverse, final arrogance. Perhaps he believed it made him seem superior to the beasts he claimed to want to command. Or perhaps he knew his wolf would cower, and he would not grant them that satisfaction. It was over swiftly. A coordinated movement, a blur of fur and finality. It was not a mauling, but an execution, precise, lethal, and mercifully quick. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sigh of the wind through the pines and the distant call of an evening bird, oblivious to the gravity below. The wolf forms dissolved back into their human shapes. The alphas, their faces etched with the grimness of the act, turned and walked back to their people without a backward glance. The circle of spectators began to disperse quietly, the shared burden settling upon them all. The ritual was complete. Varen's shadow had been cast out. As the crowd melted away, I felt a presence at my elbow. It was Eliza. Her face was pale, her usual composure replaced by something more genuine, if strained. "Clara," she said, her voice low. "A word." I nodded, stepping slightly apart from the northerners with her. Asher watched us go, giving me space. Eliza seemed to struggle for a moment, searching for the right words in a lexicon that had never included an equal conversation with me. "What you did, going into that camp, it was braver than anything I could have imagined." She looked at the ground, then back up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time since my return. "I owe you an apology. I treated you as a convenience. I never saw you." Her honesty was disarming. "You treated me as your station dictated," I replied, not with bitterness, but with simple acknowledgement. "As I allowed myself to be treated." "That's just it," she said, a flicker of frustration crossing her features. "You allowed it? You were always more quieter, yes, but with a stillness that wasn't emptiness. I think I sensed it, and it unnerved me. So I kept you in a role where I could understand you." She sighed. "My father's offer, it was a good one. For the pack. But I see why you refused. You're not a piece to be placed on his board anymore." "No," I agreed. "I'm not." She gave a small, wry smile. "The North is fortunate to have you. And I hope you find what you're looking for there." She hesitated, then added, almost shyly, "If your path ever brings you back south, you would be welcome in our home. As a guest. Not a handmaiden." It was a bridge, fragile but extended. "Thank you, Eliza." She nodded, then turned and walked back to where her father stood, already deep in conversation with Alpha Kent. I watched her go, feeling the last delicate thread of my old life sever with a clean, painless cut. I returned to the northern camp, which was a hive of quiet preparation. Tents were being struck, gear packed onto patient shadow steeds and sturdy northern ponies. We were leaving at dawn. Asher found me checking the bindings on a small pack that had been prepared for me: warm furs, travel rations, a bedroll. "Your final farewells are made?" he asked. "They are," I said. "There is nothing left to tie me here." "Good." He looked toward the darkening forest, where the path north began. "The journey is not an easy one. The passes are high, the winds cold. It is a land that tests you from the first step. I am ready for a test, I said, and meant it. The physical challenge seemed straightforward compared to the emotional and psychological labyrinth I had just navigated. That evening, a final, more subdued feast was held. It was not a celebration, but a consolidation. The 5 packs, having faced a common enemy and delivered common justice, shared food and quiet conversation. The mood was one of weary solidarity. I sat at the northern table, and accepted, if still novel, presence among Asher's warriors. They spoke to me with a respectful curiosity, asking about the southern forests, about the herbs I'd used. They were a blunt, straightforward people, their loyalty to Asher absolute, their acceptance of me stemming directly from his clear regard. As the fire burned low, Asher rose. He did not speak loudly, but his voice carried to all present. This gathering was meant for alliance through marriage, he began. It has instead forged alliance through shared blood and shared purpose. We leave at first light to return to our territories, stronger for the bonds tested and proven here. Let the message go out, those who seek to divide us will find us united. Those who prey upon the weak will find our strength waiting. A low murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. It was not a rousing speech, but a statement of fact, and in its simplicity, it was powerful. Later, as I prepared to retire to the small tent assigned to me, Asher approached. He held something in his hand, a rolled piece of soft leather. For the journey, he said, offering it. I unrolled it. Inside was a map, beautifully drawn in dark ink on supple hide. It showed the territories of the 5 southern packs in detail, but its focus was the vast, northern expanse. Mountains were sketched with terrifying steepness, rivers drawn as wild, rushing lines. One peak, taller than the others and marked with a stylized silver crescent, was circled. Silver Lake, I whispered, touching the mark. Your mother's birthplace, he confirmed. Our destination. The map will help you understand the land as we travel. The scale of it? It was a gift of immense trust and significance. Not just a guide, but an invitation into the geography of my own history. Thank you. He nodded. Rest well, Clara. Dawn comes early. I lay in the tent that night, listening to the sounds of the settling camp and the vast, ancient forest beyond. The pendant rested against my chest, the knife was secure in my pack, and now the map lay beside me. I was armed not for battle, but for discovery. The ghost was gone. In her place was a woman with a knife, a map, and a purpose, setting her face toward the unknown mountains, ready to meet whatever version of herself she might find there. Dawn arrived not with a gentle light, but with a sharp, crystalline clarity that etched every pine needle and frost-heaved stone in stark relief. The air in the high pass, known as the Stoneback, had a bite that was foreign to my southern lungs, clean, thin, and scented of rock, ice, and a distant, wild perfume I couldn't name. The northern pack moved with a silent, efficient rhythm that was mesmerizing. There were no shouted orders, only subtle hand signals and a shared, intuitive understanding of purpose. The shadow steeds, including Midnight, were laden with supplies, yet they navigated the treacherous, narrow path with a goat's sure-footedness. The warriors, some riding, more walking in their tireless, ground-eating lope, formed a protective cordon around the core of the column. I walked near the center, beside Asher for the first few miles. He pointed out features of the landscape in a low voice, his lessons practical and unadorned. See how the rock is striated there? That marks an old glacier's path. The wind will be fiercest at the next bend. Or, that moss only grows on the south face. Remember it? In a whiteout, such things are the difference between life and death. It was not the lore of poets, but the language of survival. I listened intently, storing each fact like a precious seed. The trail wound ever upward, the forest of towering pines gradually giving way to stunted, wind-warped trees and finally to vast, open slopes of scree and exposed granite. The world expanded terrifyingly. In the southern woods, the sky was a patchwork through branches. Here, it was an immense bowl of pale blue, dwarfing the very mountains. The scale was humbling, a constant reminder of our insignificance and the sheer audacity of claiming a life in such a place. By midday, we had ascended above the tree line. The sun was bright but held no warmth, its light was reflected blindingly off patches of stubborn snow. The wind became a constant, keening presence, plucking at cloaks and stealing breath. I pulled the thick, fur-lined hood of my northern garment closer, grateful for its unfamiliar weight. A young warrior named Fen, who had been assigned to keep a general eye on me, fell into step beside me as the path widened slightly. He had an open, earnest face, barely older than me, with eyes the color of a summer lake. "Your first time in the high places?" he asked, his voice raised slightly against the wind. I nodded, my breath forming little clouds. "It's larger than I imagined." He grinned. It puts things in their place, doesn't it? Down south, a wolf might think himself the center of the world. Up here, you remember you're just another creature trying not to freeze or fall off." His tone was not gloomy, but matter of fact, almost reverent. "King says you're of Silver Lake blood." "My mother was," I confirmed, the statement still feeling unreal. Fen's expression grew respectful. "Strong line. Good hunters. Good scouts. The Silver Lake folk have an eye for detail, see what others miss." He glanced at me, his gaze assessing but not unkind. "Might explain how you spotted Varen's plan." It was the first time anyone had directly connected my actions to a northern trait. It felt like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place inside me. As the afternoon wore on, the pace remained relentless but steady. I was pushed to my limits, my half-human stamina no match for the wolves around me, but no one complained when I lagged. Fen would simply slow his pace, or Asher, from the front, would call a brief halt by a wind-sheltered outcrop without needing to be asked. The consideration was silent, built into their travel as naturally as checking the sky for weather. During one such stop, as I sipped icy water from a skin, Asher came to sit on a rock beside me. He studied my face, reddened by wind and exertion. "The air is thinner here. Your human side will feel it sooner." "Headache." "Lightness." "A little," I admitted. "But it's manageable." "Good. Your wolf blood strengthens your heart and lungs beyond a full human's. It is one of the gifts." He looked out over the staggering vista of jagged peaks and plunging valleys. "This land does not suffer the weak. But it rewards resilience with a strength you cannot find in softer places. It forges a different kind of wolf." "Is that what it did to you?" The question slipped out, bold in the vast quiet. He was silent for a long moment. "It showed me what I was made of," he said finally. "And what I was capable of becoming. The violence, the harshness, it is real. But so is the clarity. There are no shadows to hide in up here. You are what you are, for good or ill." I thought of my life in the southern pack, of the endless, subtle layers of hierarchy and expectation, of the shadows I had clung to. This brutal honesty of landscape felt, paradoxically, like a relief. We pressed on as the sun began its rapid descent, painting the western peaks in fiery gold and rose. Asher called a halt for the night in a shallow, rocky basin that offered some shelter from the incessant wind. The camp was made with practiced speed, no tents, just bedrolls arranged in a tight circle, a small, contained fire built in a depression of stones. The steads were gathered in the center, a living windbreak and source of warmth. As I unrolled my furs, Thorn, the severe beta, approached Asher with a report on the sentry rotations. His eyes flicked to me, then away. "The scout from the rear guard reports no signs of pursuit. The southern packs have withdrawn to their borders." "Good," Asher said. "Double the watch anyway. First night in the high pass is always the hardest for the unacclimated." He didn't look at me, but the meaning was clear. I ate the travel rations, tough dried meat, harder cheese, a paste of crushed nuts and berries without complaint, savoring the simple act of replenishing energy. The fire was too small for real warmth, but its flickering light was a defiant gesture against the encroaching dark and cold. As full night fell, the temperature plummeted. The cold was an entity, seeping through layers of fur and wool, pressing with icy fingers. I lay in my bedroll, shivering despite my best efforts, listening to the deep, even breathing of the wolves around me. Their metabolisms, their thick winter coats, made this merely chilly. For me, it was a biting, relentless ache. A shadow moved near me. Asher knelt, his form blotting out the starlight. Without a word, he unfolded an additional, heavier fur cloak, one that smelled faintly of pine and him, and laid it over my existing covers. The weight was immediate, the residual warmth from his body a startling contrast to the night air. "You need to tell someone if the cold becomes unbearable," he said quietly. "Pride is a poor companion to frostbite." "Thank you," I whispered, the words swallowed by the vast, Stardusted sky above. He stayed there for a moment, a solid, dark shape against the glittering infinity. "Look up," he murmured. I did. With no trees and little atmosphere to blur the view, the sky was a breathtaking tapestry. The moon, just past full, cast a silver wash over the peaks. But it was the stars that stole my breath, countless, brilliant pinpricks of light in depths of velvet black I had never seen, the Milky Way a river of spilled diamond dust across the heavens. In the north, Asher's voice was a soft rumble beside me. "We say the stars are the eyes of the first wolves, watching over the mountains they carved. They see everything, the hunter and the prey, the loyal and the traitor. There is no hiding from that gaze. Only living in accordance with it, or defying it and being remembered." Lying there, buried under firs, dwarfed by the impossible architecture of rock and sky, I felt a profound shift. This was not a land that asked for compliance to social rules. It asked for endurance, for honesty with oneself, for the courage to exist under that ancient, stellar scrutiny. My mother had come from this. She had carried its uncompromising essence within her, even in the softer south. Asher rose and returned to his own bedroll. I pulled the fur he had given me tighter. It sent a comfort, the stars a silent, magnificent audience to the beginning of my true journey. The cold was still there, the ache in my muscles a reality, but beneath it was a new, steady pulse, the beginning of understanding. The second day on the stone-back path dawned with the sky the color of a fresh bruise. The sharp clarity of the previous morning was gone, replaced by a thick, ominous haze that blurred the distant peaks. The wind had shifted, now carrying a damp, metallic scent that made the hair on my arms prickle. Asher stood at the edge of our rocky basin, head lifted, nostrils flaring as he tested the air. His expression was grim. "Storm," he announced to the assembling pack, his voice carrying easily in the heavy silence. "Not snow. Ice. The sentinel is waking." A murmur ran through the warriors. The sentinel, I would learn, was their name for the tallest peak in this section of the range, a capricious, treacherous giant known for hurling lethal weather at those who trespassed on its slopes. "We are in the lee now," Thorn said, his face etched with concern. "But the path ahead crosses its eastern shoulder. If we are caught on that exposure, we cannot stay here," Asher finished. "This basin will become a wind funnel. We move faster than yesterday. Fen, Ricker, scout the shoulder. I want word of the ice before we commit." The two young wolves shifted immediately, their human forms dissolving into sleek, gray-furred wolves that shot up the path with fluid speed. The rest of us broke camp with urgent efficiency. The carefree mood of the previous day was gone, replaced by a focused, silent urgency. We climbed. The path grew steeper, more treacherous, the rock underfoot slick with a thin, invisible film of moisture that was beginning to freeze. I focused entirely on my footing, on matching the pace set before me, on breathing the thinning air that now burned with cold. Fen's wolf returned, shifting back at a run, his breath pluming in great gusts. "The shoulder is clear for now, but the air tastes of coming sleet. The stone is already weeping ice." Asher nodded. "Then we run it?" The order was given. The column tightened, warriors moving closer, their bodies forming a more literal shield against what was to come. Asher dropped back to walk beside me. "When it hits, do not stop. Keep your head down. If you fall, someone will pull you up. Do not let go of Midnight's stirrup." He had tethered a long lead from the great stallion's saddle to my belt, a humbling but necessary precaution. We reached the shoulder. It was a narrow, terrifying ledge carved into the sheer face of the mountain, with a dizzying drop into mist-shrouded nothingness on one side and a wall of slick, weeping granite on the other. The wind here was a living thing, howling up from the depths, trying to pluck us from the rock. We were halfway across when the sentinel spoke. It began not with snow, but with a hissing, horizontal rain that froze the instant it touched stone, cloak, or skin. The world turned into a chaotic, roaring glassworks. The path became a deadly slide. The wind screamed, laden with stinging pellets of ice that felt like needles against any exposed flesh. "Move." Asher's roar was barely audible over the fury. He was in front of me now, a broad, dark shape breaking the worst of the wind. I clung to Midnight's stirrup, the frozen leather searing my fingers even through my gloves. My world narrowed to the next footstep, the next shuddering breath, the solid, reassuring bulk of the horse and the man ahead. Ahead, a cry cut through the storm's shriek. One of the pack ponies, laden with supplies, lost its footing on the ice-sheathed stone. It scrabbled desperately, its hooves finding no purchase, its terrified whinny swallowed by the wind. It teetered on the edge of the abyss. The warrior leading it, a grizzled veteran named Crawl, threw his weight against the pony's flank, trying to shove it back from the brink, but the ice defeated him. He slipped, falling hard, his own body sliding toward the drop. Time seemed to fracture. I saw the pony's rolling eye, the warrior's desperate grab for a non-existent handhold. I saw Asher start to turn, but he was too far ahead, the line of warriors between us a chaotic, stumbling barrier. My body moved before my mind could counsel caution. I let go of Midnight's stirrup. The wind immediately tried to claim me, shoving me toward the cliff face. I dropped to my hands and knees, the ice biting through my trousers, and crawled. Not toward the pony, but toward the wall of the mountain, where a jagged spur of rock jutted out just behind the struggling animals. I had no wolf strength to pull a pony. I had no warrior's courage. But I had a human's eye for angles, for the small, overlooked detail. I had spent a lifetime seeing what others missed. The rock spur was not just a feature, it was an anchor. The pony's lead rope, a thick braid of leather, was thrashing wildly. As I crabbed along the cliff face, the wind trying to peel me off, I snagged the flailing end of the rope. My fingers, numb with cold, fumbled, but I wrapped it once, twice around the spur, pulling it taut just as the pony's hind leg slid completely over the edge. The rope snapped tight with a sound like a cracking whip. The pony screamed, its weight now suspended, pulling the rope against the rock with terrifying force. But the spur held. Crawl, seeing the lifeline, scrambled back from the edge and added his own strength, bracing his feet and heaving. It was a frozen, screaming tableau for a handful of heartbeats. Then Asher was there, his strength monumental. He grabbed the rope beside Crawl, his muscles corded, and with a final, grunting heave, dragged the pony's forequarters back onto the ledge. The beast scrambled, found footing, and stood trembling, eyes wide with terror but alive. Crawl slumped against the cliff, breathing in ragged gasps. He looked from the saved pony to me, still crouched by the spur, my hands raw from the rope. He gave a single, sharp nod, the highest acknowledgement from a northern warrior. Asher's hand closed around my arm, hauling me to my feet. His face was a mask of ice and fury, his silver eyes blazing. I said, "Do not let go," he shouted over the wind, but the anger in his eyes was undercut by something else, a stark, primal fear. The spur was there, I shouted back, my voice thin. The rope was long enough. He stared at me for a second, the storm howling around us, then he simply pulled me into the shelter of his body, turning us both to face the path ahead. "Move," he commanded the column, and we were moving again, the incident buried by the immediate, overwhelming need for survival. We staggered off the shoulder an eternity later, collapsing into a slightly more sheltered gully where the force of the wind was broken. The sleet turned to a heavy, wet snow. We were all coated in a layer of ice, breathing in ragged, painful gulps. Asher checked the column, ensuring no one else was lost. When he came to me, he didn't speak. He took my hands in his, turning them over. The gloves were shredded, the skin beneath raw and bleeding from the rope. His touch was unexpectedly gentle. From a pouch at his belt, he produced a small container of pungent salve and carefully applied it to the abrasions, his movements precise despite the cold stiffening everyone's fingers. "You used your eyes," he said finally, his voice low. "Not your strength. You saw the spur. You calculated the rope." "It was the only thing I could do," I said, my teeth chattering. "It was the right thing to do," he corrected. He finished bandaging my hands with strips of clean linen. "Crawl owes you a life debt. In the north, that is a serious thing. It means you will never want for an ally in his line." I looked over at the veteran, who was checking his pony with careful hands. He caught my eye and placed a fist over his heart, a solemn gesture. The storm began to abate as quickly as it had come, the sentinel's fury spent. As we prepared to move on, trudging through deepening snow, the dynamic in the pack had subtly shifted. The glances sent my way were no longer just of curiosity or resigned acceptance. There was a new element, respect. Not the respect owed to rank or brute power, but the kind earned in a moment of shared peril, by using what you had to protect the whole. Asher walked beside me once more as we descended into a lower valley. The world was hushed under its new blanket of white. "The land tests," he said quietly, echoing his words from the day before. And it reveals. Today, it revealed a mind that thinks like the North, even if the body is not yet hardened to it. He looked at me, his gaze thoughtful. Your mother would be proud. In that moment, cold to the bone, hands throbbing, but surrounded by a quiet, newfound acceptance, I felt, for the first time, that she might have been. The storm's wrath was a memory etched into sore muscles and raw hands, but the land it revealed as we descended from the high passes was a revelation of a different kind. The air grew thicker, easier to breathe, carrying the rich, damp scent of conifers and cold, clear water. The jagged, unforgiving granite softened into rolling, forested hills, the trees here taller and straighter than any in the south, their branches heavy with cloaks of snow. We had been traveling for 5 days. The brutal test of the sentinel's shoulder had been a forge, and in its fires, my place within the traveling pack had been tempered into something solid. I was no longer just Asher's puzzling charge, I was Clara, who had seen the spur and used the rope. The warriors spoke to me more freely, their initial reserve thawed by shared survival. On the morning of the 6th day, Asher called an early halt at the crest of a wooded ridge. The pack gathered behind him, a silent, expectant audience. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Come. I followed him through a final stand of immense, ancient pines, their trunks wider than I could span with both arms. The snow crunched under our boots. Then, the trees simply ended. We stood on the edge of a vast, frozen wonder. It was a valley, cradled between the arms of 2 majestic, snow-capped mountains. At its heart lay a lake, so perfectly circular it seemed drawn by a divine hand. Its surface was a pane of milky, opaque ice, covered in a flawless blanket of snow that blurred its edges seamlessly into the white shoreline. All around it, the forest stood in a silent, respectful guard, dark green against the blinding white. The sky above was a pale, wintry blue, and the silence was absolute, profound, a living thing that pressed against the ears. Silver Lake, Asher said, his voice hushed, as if in a sacred space. I could not speak. The beauty of it was a physical ache in my chest. It was wild and serene, formidable and gentle, all at once. This was not just a place on a map. This was the source. The wellspring of my mother's stories, the inspiration for the pendant at my throat, the homeland her blood had never forgotten. The ice is thick, Asher continued, gesturing. It will hold until the spring thaw. The settlement is on the far shore, nestled in the trees. You cannot see it from here. They believe in living with the land, not dominating it. I followed his gaze, but saw only undisturbed forest. The humility of that building a home so in harmony with its surroundings that it vanished spoke volumes about the people who lived here. My mother, she lived there. My voice was a whisper, stolen by the immense quiet. She was born in the longhouse you still cannot see, he nodded. She learned to track on these slopes, to fish through that ice, to read the weather in the shape of the clouds over those peaks. He looked at me. This landscape shaped her. Its clarity, its patience, its unforgiving truth. You carry that shape within you, Clara. You always have. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in my eyes, freezing almost instantly on my lashes. It wasn't sadness. It was an overwhelming sense of homecoming to a home I had never known. The ghost of my mother felt vividly present here, in the crispness of the air, the scent of pine and ice, the majestic, silent watchfulness of the mountains. The rest of the pack remained at the tree line, giving us this moment. Asher stood beside me, a solid, silent companion as I absorbed the vista of my ancestry. What happens now? I finally asked, wiping at my icy cheeks. Now, he said, we go down. We will be met by scouts long before we reach the shore. The Silver Lake folk are cautious. They will want to look upon Della's daughter before they welcome her. The descent into the valley was like walking into a dream. The snow muffled all sound except our breathing and the soft crunch of our passage. True to Asher's word, we had not gone half a mile before 3 figures emerged from the trees ahead as if materializing from the forest itself. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in furs and leathers the color of the winter woods. They carried long hunting spears, not in threat, but as natural extensions of their beings. The woman, older with wise eyes and a single gray braid over her shoulder, stepped forward. Her gaze swept over Asher and his warriors with respectful recognition, then settled on me. It was a searching, penetrating look that seemed to bypass my exterior entirely. She inhaled deeply, her nostrils flaring. She said nothing for a long moment. Then, she spoke, her voice like the rustle of dry pine needles. The scent of Silver Lake, and of distant sunshine. Her eyes, the color of the lake's frozen surface, softened. You have her eyes. Della's eyes. My breath caught. No one in the south had ever said I looked like my mother. Asher inclined his head. Elder Nara. This is Clara, daughter of Della. Elder Nara's gaze flicked to Asher, a question in them. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Her posture relaxed minutely. King Asher honors us with his presence, and with the return of lost kin. She turned back to me. Come, child. The longhouse is warm. Your story is one we have waited many winters to hear. The walk to the settlement was conducted in near silence, but it was a comfortable, observant quiet. The Silver Lake wolves moved with an uncanny stealth, their footfalls leaving barely a trace in the snow. Their village, when it finally revealed itself, was exactly as Asher had described, a part of the forest. Long, low buildings of timber and stone with sod roofs almost indistinguishable from the surrounding drifts, connected by covered walkways. Smoke curled lazily from a few central chimneys, the only sign of habitation. It was functional, beautiful in its simplicity, and utterly defensible. People emerged as we entered the central clearing, men, women, children, their faces curious, guarded, but not hostile. They looked like their land, strong, weathered, with eyes that held the stillness of the frozen lake. We were led to the largest longhouse. Inside, it was dim and wonderfully warm, heated by a central fire pit. The air smelled of wood smoke, curing pelts, and savory stew. Benches lined the walls, and at the far end, a carved chair of ancient, dark wood sat empty, the elder's seat, I presumed. Elder Nara gestured for me to sit on a bench near the fire. Asher sat beside me, his presence a familiar anchor in this new world. The other villagers filed in, filling the benches, their attention fixed on me. Tell us, Elder Nara said simply, taking her own seat. Tell us of Della. And of yourself. So, I did. I spoke of my childhood in the south, of my mother's gentle strength and her secret sorrows, of her stories that hinted at mountains and ice. I spoke of her death, of my life as a ghost in a pack that was not mine. I spoke of the mating ceremony, of Asher's recognition, of the truth of my heritage that had shattered and reassembled my world. I told them of Varen, of the dark hollow, of the storm on the sentinel's shoulder. I held up my bandaged hands as testament. I did not embellish. I did not plead. I simply laid the truth before them, as stark and clear as the landscape outside. When I finished, the silence in the longhouse was deep, thoughtful. Elder Nara studied me for a long time. Then she looked at Asher. You vouch for this telling, King Asher. I do, he said, his voice firm. Every word. And I have seen her courage with my own eyes. The blood of Silver Lake runs true, if mixed. Elder Nara nodded slowly. She looked around at her people, exchanging silent communications with glances and slight gestures. Finally, she turned back to me. Della made a choice to leave, to protect you. It was a mother's choice, and we do not fault her for it, though her absence was a wound. Her gaze was unwavering. You have returned, not as a child seeking shelter, but as a woman who has been tested. You carry her eyes, her scent, and it seems, her quiet courage. The lake does not refuse its own, even those who return by winding paths. She rose and walked to a carved wooden chest against the wall. Opening it, she drew out an object wrapped in soft, supple leather. She brought it to me and placed it in my hands. I unwrapped it. Inside was a knife sheath, old but lovingly maintained, tooled with the same crescent moon and vine pattern as my pendant and Della's knife. It was a perfect fit for the blade in my boot. This was the mate to the knife you carry, Elder Nara said. Della left it behind. It belongs with its other half. Welcome home, Clara of Silver Lake. Your mother's hearth is yours. What you build upon it is for you to decide. The finality of acceptance, so simply given, after a lifetime of conditional tolerance, was a wave that nearly broke me. I clutched the sheath, the carved moon biting into my palm, and looked out through the open door of the longhouse at the twilight gathering over the frozen lake, my lake. The ghost was not just gone, she had been given a name, a place, and a history. I was home. The first days at Silver Lake were a lesson in a new kind of silence. Not the silence of hiding, but the deep, full quiet of a world in winter's thrall, of people who spoke with actions as often as words. I was given a small, sturdy cabin on the edge of the settlement, one that had belonged to a cousin of my mother's, now living with his own grown children. It was simply furnished a bed, a table, a stout hearth, but it was mine. The first true space I had ever owned. Elder Nara assigned a woman named Lyra to help me acclimatize. Lyra was around my mother's would-be age, with a no-nonsense kindness and hands permanently stained with plant dyes. She showed me the rhythms of the settlement, the ice fishing holes maintained on the lake, the smokehouse where the autumn's hunt was preserved, the sheltered herb garden under thick panes of ice where hardy winter greens clung to life. We live with the cold, Lyra explained as we chopped firewood one morning, the activity warming us more than the weak Sunday. We do not fight it. We learn its patterns, its weaknesses, and we prepare. It was the philosophy of the North in a nutshell: respect, adapt, endure. The Silver Lake people observed me with a polite, persistent curiosity. They asked gentle questions about my mother's later years, her human mate, the southern forests. They listened to my answers, their faces thoughtful. My actions during the journey, particularly on the Sentinel's shoulder, had preceded me, told in terse, factual terms by Fen and Kral. It earned me a baseline of respect that had nothing to do with my bloodline and everything to do with demonstrated character. Asher and his warriors stayed for 3 days. His presence was a significant event, a king visiting a remote lineage. He spent hours in council with Elder Nara and the other elders, discussing border security, the implications of Varen's defeat, and the renewed alliance between the northern heartlands and its outlying clans like Silver Lake. He did not crowd me. But I was always aware of him. We shared meals in the longhouse, and sometimes he would find me on my daily walks, falling into step beside me with a casualness that felt deliberate. On his last afternoon, he found me at the lake shore. I was staring out across the vast, white plain, watching the wind sculpt swirling patterns in the snow. The immensity of it still stole my breath. "It settles on you," he observed, coming to stand beside me. "The quiet. It feels like a truth I had forgotten," I said. "Or never knew." He nodded, his gaze also on the distant, snow-shrouded mountains. "What will you do with it, Clara? This truth? This place?" I had been asking myself the same question. The Southern Pack's offer was a distant memory, a path closed. Here, I had family I had never met, a history, a home. But a home required a purpose. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I'm not a hunter. I'm not a warrior. My skills are Southern. Herbalism, observation, blending in." "You say that as if it is a weakness," he said, turning to look at me. His silver eyes were intent. "Silver Lake survived because it sees what others miss. Your mother's gift was a form of extreme observation. You have that same eye. You proved it on the mountain. The settlement has healers, but their knowledge is of northern plants, northern ailments. Your southern herbs, your different perspective, it could be a strength. A bridge." The idea took root instantly. A purpose that used exactly who and what I was. Not to hide it, but to offer it. "You have been planning this," I said, not as an accusation, but with dawning understanding. "I have been considering possibilities," he corrected gently. "The choice was always yours. It still is. You could stay here, learn the northern ways fully, become a healer for this clan. You could return south with new knowledge. Or," he paused. "The world is wider than just north and south. There are other clans, other needs. A healer with a foot in both worlds could walk many paths." He was offering me not just a home, but a horizon. The ultimate choice. "And you?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Where does your path lead now, King Asher?" "Back to the seat of the Northern Kings," he said. "To the Hall of the Winter Star. The work of unifying the territories, ensuring Varen's poison is truly gone, is just beginning." He looked at me, and the formality of the king faded, leaving just the man, weary but resolute. It is a lonely seat, often. Surrounded by loyalty, but not always by understanding. The confession was stark in its simplicity. I thought of the fear he inspired, the scar that spoke of a violent past, the weight of a crown taken from a brutal father. He had built respect through strength and fairness, but who saw the man beneath the mantle? You should have someone there who understands seeing from the edge, I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke it. Someone who can notice the small cracks before they become fissures. A different kind of advisor. His eyes held mine, a question and an answer shimmering in their mercury depths. Is that an offer, Clara of Silver Lake? It is a possibility, I said, echoing his own words, a small smile touching my lips. One of many. But, it is a compelling one. He returned the smile, a true one that softened the harsh lines of his face. The journey to the Hall of the Winter Star is longer and harder than the one to this lake. The politics are ice of a different kind. It is not a peaceful life. I have had enough peace to last a lifetime, I said. I find I have a taste for purpose instead. He was silent for a long moment, the wind whipping his dark hair around his face. Then consider this, he said finally. Spend the winter here. Learn the depths of your mother's legacy. Let the silence teach you what it will. When the thaw comes and the first paths clear, if your choice leads you north to the hall, send word. You will always have a place there. He reached into his tunic and withdrew a token, a simple, polished circle of obsidian etched with a stylized star. Show this to any northern scout, and you will have safe passage and escort. I took the cool, smooth stone. It was not a chain, not a demand. It was a key. Thank you, Asher. He inclined his head. Thank you, Clara. For reminding an old wolf that new ways of seeing have value. He turned to go, then paused. The half moon sees both the darkness and the light. Do not forget to look in both directions. Then he was striding back toward the settlement, the king returning to his duties. The next morning, the northern contingent departed at dawn. I stood with the Silver Lake folk to see them off. Asher, astride midnight, looked every inch the warrior king. His eyes found me in the crowd. He placed a fist over his heart, the northern salute of respect and loyalty, and held my gaze for a long moment. Then he turned, and they were gone, disappearing into the forest from which they had come. Winter settled in with a profound depth. I learned to ice fish, my hands growing tough and nimble. I helped Lyra in her dye works, learning the properties of northern lichens and roots. I shared my knowledge of southern poultices and tisanes with the settlement's healers, an exchange that felt like true kinship. In the long evenings, by the fire in the longhouse, I listened to stories of my mother as a girl, wild and bright and gifted, and felt her presence settle into my bones, no longer a ghost of loss, but a legacy of strength. The obsidian token stayed in a pouch with my mother's pendant and the matching knife sheath. A choice, deferred but not forgotten. One night, as the deepest cold of the season held the world in its grip, I stood again at the shore of the frozen lake. The moon, a sharp silver crescent, hung above the mountains, its twin reflected in the ice of the pendant at my throat. I looked north, toward the unseen Hall of the Winter Star, and then south, toward the life I had left behind. I stood precisely between, under a sky of endless stars. I was no longer a half-blood caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. I was a bridge. A observer. A healer. A woman with a knife, a map, and a key. The silence around me was not empty, it was full of potential, waiting for the sound of my own footsteps to give it direction. The ghost was gone. In her place stood Clara, daughter of Della, of the Silver Lake, and the path ahead, though uncharted, was finally, unquestionably, her own.